thank you all today for coming and registering to participate in the supervision workshop. I know that this workshop in particular will be very beneficial to us, not only as just centres, but as for those lifeguards, duty managers and leaders in the room. Supervision is more than what happens on pool deck. There are a lot of processes and procedures in the background to help reflect everything that happens out on pool deck. Again, for those that are just arriving, thank you so much for making it in safely. Please don't apologise for your tardiness. I know the traffic has been a bit horrendous. So there's a few guests and centre presenters today which have graciously volunteered their time, I guess, to help relay some information and set down some strong foundations, as well as some other barriers that we're going to, I guess, face within supervision. We're going to learn about how we can potentially implement, if not strengthen, our own supervision plans within our centres, and also on how to implement that supervision plan. So it's all great on having the documentation, but is everything you've got documented reflected out in your operation? If not, we're going to try and find that gap and where we can actually have those pieces of paper reflected out in your operations. So before we start, I just want to acknowledge the lands of the Mudurong people of the Southeastern Kulin Nation on the lands that we stand, acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we gather here today, and pay respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, and to recognise any other elders that may be here today. I also want to go through and say that we as LSV begin the meeting with a mindfulness of positivity to provide a safe and supporting environment to build across LSV lifesaving and across all industry, to encourage everyone to be part of an open, respectful exchange of ideas and value everything that is shared. So what I would hope for everyone in the room is that we at least grab one sense of topic or one sense of learning out of today. Like I said, there's plenty of topics that we're going to be going through today, but if we can walk out with one piece of information that resonates and that we can take to our centres, we're all going to be better for it. So one question I actually want to go through and ask is, I want to raise the hands of lifeguards in the room. How many lifeguards do we have in the room? Please raise your hands. All right. Now, I want to ask, how many duty managers and centre coordinators do we have in the room? Can you please raise your hands? Now, can I please ask, for those leaders, duty managers that have raised their hands, are you lifeguard qualified? So, again, how many lifeguards do we have in the room? Can you please raise your hand? There you go. All right. Please keep that in mind as we work through. So the first presentation today is what we're going to set off for a strong foundation. We have RJ from the Royal Lifesaving Society of Australia that has made his way from Sydney graciously today. Please excuse if he has any baggy eyes. All right, it's been a long trip for him today, and this is why we invented coffee, just for occasions like this. So for RJ, he'll be coming through and I guess laying the foundations for safer aquatic locations and pretty much referring back to the regulations and stuff that we should all be aware of. So again, we want to strengthen our foundations, know and understand where we are now as the runnings of the centre and where we can improve moving forward. That's what I want you to have in your mind. All right, as we come to this, reflect on where you are now and where we can start moving forward with the information we gathered today. So again, we'll welcome RJ to come up for the first presentation on safer aquatic locations.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks everyone for having me, and to the Lifesaving Victoria team for getting everyone together again. It's actually been a little while since I've been in this room and it's been full like this. It's really pleasing to see, actually. And it's great to see some folks from over the years that have been around for a long time, some, lots of former colleagues, but also a lot of really new, fresh faces. So I'm sorry to add to the hands up kind of scenario here, but can I just get a show of hands? Who's changed jobs in the last year? be confident about it. Like, let's, great, okay. And who has been working in, let's say, aquatic operations or risk management, supervision, whatever it is, for less than a year? Okay, that's good, that's good. All right, so the brief here was, hey, there might be a few people in the room who've never heard of the GSPO, so hopefully that's not the case. But I was asked to kind of cover off some ground that's a little bit historical about the GSPO and the kind of why the GSPO and what goes around the GSPO, more so than the actual content of that document. So a lot of today will be about kind of framing the what is it, why do we do it that way, why is that the kind of model for it? So I want to start with a little quiz. So who was the first life-saving group in Australia? What year what year was life-saving first established in Victoria? Where and when was the first constructed swimming pool in Australia? Was it A, Melbourne City Baths, or B, Don Fraser Baths? How many drownings occur in public pools every year? And when was the first GSPO iteration published? And you get a bonus point if you know where it was published. We got the answers? Anyone want to have a crack? Okay. The first one was a trick question. So First Nations groups have been engaged in swimming and life-saving in this country for 40,000 years. You know, the notion that we're the first groups, whether it's royal life-saving or surf life-saving or you know, swimming pools, the notion that we're the first people out there teaching swimming and life-saving is kind of it's a nonsense, right? So there's a rich history there that we haven't really tapped into, that is a journey that both Lifesaving Victoria, Royal Lifesaving Australia are on, a reconciliation journey. We'd really encourage the aquatic industry across the board to have a really strong think about those connections to First Nations peoples and their connection to land and water, and how we can learn from that, particularly as we address a lot of climate-related issues moving forward. That will be, and is this year, that one of the #1 drowning drivers is actually climate change up and down the East Coast and all the drownings relating to flooding. Life-saving activities were established in Victoria in 1904. Don Fraser Baths was the first constructed swimming pool in Australia. There's an average of 8 fatal drownings in public pools every year across Australia, and there's 3 non-fatals for every fatal. So there's still a lot of people drowning in pools. You probably don't hear about it. Victoria's doing a really, really good job, actually, comparatively. Queensland's probably the most overrepresented in those statistics, and Northern Territory is, as a head of population, highly overrepresented. And that has a lot to do with Aboriginal and First Nations communities as well. So getting sort of aquatics and that love of water back into those communities is really important for us. And then first GSPO was 1991 here in Victoria. It was written by probably colleagues in the sort of Lifesaving Victoria ecosystem who are still around and still doing lots of things in drowning prevention. And then it's sort of grown and iterated from there. So it's about 31 years, I guess, that it's been in place. So I'll cover a wee bit who we are, why we do it. So water-loving nation, free from drowning. Water-loving is the first part of that for a reason. So we want everyone to enjoy the water, celebrate aquatics, go to their local pool, enjoy swimming lessons, have a good time, have fun swimming, celebrate aquatics. It's not just about elite sport for us, and it's not just about the drowning piece. It's also about enjoyment and fun and creating experiences that people enjoy in your facilities. Our purpose is to lead efforts to reduce drowning. It's a small L on leadership. We're really about facilitation. We want to facilitate processes where others can lead. There's a whole army of people out there teaching swimming and life-saving and getting involved. And our sort of mantras in that are everyone can be a lifesaver, and solutions to issues are best built with others. So that's kind of this is our sort of leadership model, if that makes sense. So water safety policy in Australia, the water safety strategy is a joint initiative. Surf Lifesaving and Royal Lifesaving and OSWIM probably started the first one. It used to just be like a plan that said, these are all the things, it was like a shopping list, these are the things we're going to do, and these are the things we're going to do. Amalgamated. Now there's about 13 organizations involved, and it's really a cross-sectoral thing, and it's everyone gets together and they look at, okay, we know a lot about teaching swimming, or we know a lot about swimming pools. These people know a lot about rock fishing and multicultural groups that are getting swept off of rocks, and these people know a lot about boat licensing and the fact that a lot of drownings are happening in blue water well off the coast. Yeah, so there's a lot of people in the drowning prevention ecosystem that aren't just swimming pools. It's not just Royal Lifesaving or Surf Lifesaving. It's actually a really broad ecosystem, And a lot of them are government organisations, actually. So this is about bringing everyone together, putting them on the same page. Home pools is an Australian standard process, and that's about barriers. And so there's a whole bunch of really passionate people working in that space. That's a really key issue in drowning, is those toddlers and drowning in backyard pools. Massive issue, and there's been really great progress. Drowning in that age group has halved over the last 10 years. So there's been a lot of work in that space by people that aren't probably in this room or represented by the people in this room. Publicly accessible swimming pools, so I'll talk a bit about that. So that's the National Aquatic Industry Committee. That's a process that we facilitate. And the Guidelines for Safe Pool Operations is that piece. And then Beaches Surf Lifesaving Australia has done the Australian Public Coastal Safety Guidelines for a very long time as well. And so there's a bit of policy and regulation in that space as well. So National Aquatic Industry Committee is a cross-sectoral model. It's intended to bring everyone together and to get everyone to kind of agree. Historically, you would have legal cases come through, particularly from the US, and then courts would pick that up and go, should we apply this here, should we not? You'd have a lot of different peak bodies issuing their own guidelines, sometimes competing. You can dive into this deep water versus you can dive into this deep water, and that would create inconsistency for the operators who depending on which guideline they were picking up, there'd be confusion around which one to follow. And so the kind of concept here was, well, let's get everyone together and let's create a document that's driven by industry, written for industry by industry, endorsed by industry, where everyone agrees, no, this is the one-stop shop, this is the one Bible as such for how we're going to build and operate these facilities from a safety perspective. So that's kind of the why. And these are the sort of members of that. So it's a kind of a broad group. Everyone from Swimming Australia through to the SPASA who look after construction. You've got all the state peak bodies. You've got a number of councils, a number of management agencies, and collectively there's over 1,500 sort of swimming pools are represented by that group. So publicly accessible swimming pools is quite a large group. But we're pleased that Alec is one of your sort of local reps, as well as Kathy from ARV, Amanda Locke in Geelong, and there might be someone else from Vic. Apologies if I've missed anyone. So Liam O'Brien as well from Aligned Leisure, and I think we've got someone from YMCA Victoria as well in the group. So you've got quite a few sort of members there, if that makes sense, people that you can go to. And if you've got something that you want to see changed in the GSPO, those people have the power to do that. Yeah, they have the power to bring forward issues and go, hey, we want to review this, we want to go through a process, and the answer here is we, Royal Lifesaving, will engage with that, listen to that, and go through that process. So it's very much a living document. So the things that we're up to this year is there's going to be a new training guideline. There's one under development right now. Just incorporates some of the changes in that sort of regulatory space. I think Andy might be talking a bit about that later, but there's new skill sets coming out that are tied in with the Australian Skills Qualification Authority and that framework, so it's kind of something we have to do. Child safety guidelines, so there's some really bad press coming out of New South Wales this week and last week about, it's almost loath to talk about it, but there's some really horrible things happening in some swimming pools. So this is a really urgent issue. It's been going on for a number of years. It's been on everyone's agenda, but it needs another push again because there's still stuff going on there that's really tragic, and it's hurting everyone. We're doing a State of Industry Infrastructure report. Key finding is that there's about 500 pools that are about to expire at the end of this decade, and those pools need urgent sort of infrastructure investment. And then we're publishing a report, which is a sort of part 2 to our PwC report last year, and this is looking at Learn to Swim and how we can strengthen that ecosystem. How can we get a range of actors, governments, non-government organizations, industry, the community behind strengthening Learn to Swim across the board. Victoria's doing really, really well in that space. I think from 5 years ago, the government had the least investment in Victorian swimming lessons, which kind of feeds through into swimming pools here. And now they have the most investment. So the team at Lifesaving Victoria have been working really, really hard in that space with the Department of Education in Victoria for a number of years to increase the investment in swimming and water safety, which directly feeds into your facilities and strengthens the sustainability of your business models and your aquatic facilities. And then another initiative that we were really keen to have a look at is co-designing some sort of workforce and infrastructure strategy on the back of some of the issues that we've been facing and that you guys are facing every day. So here's a quick overview of the current guidelines. There are 12 guidelines in place, and there's a bunch of sort of sub-guidelines, I suppose, incorporated into that. Today's topic's obviously about supervision, so a bit of historical overview there. So there's 30 guidelines within the supervision section. It was nearly a 2-year sort of review process to write that at the time. There was 612 comments and feedback from the aquatic industry. It was released in 2018, and there was a year essentially to kind of get up to speed and get that across the line. I remember I've got colleagues from the city of Yarra there. I was running pools with them at the time, and it was a lot of work, and there's still ongoing work really in that space to kind of make sure that all the items are addressed. So there's a lot in there. The methods of that was a systematic review, literature review, research review about lifeguard scanning and drowning issues. There was a series of workshops, consultation forums held. There was a series of case studies, and 13 years of coronial inquests were reviewed as well as part of that process. So things like putting a supervision plan, doing a risk assessment, none of those things were in there before. So those all came out of actually Victorian coronial recommendations for drownings at Watermark and Ascot Vale in 2014 and 15. So these are the sort of key components. I don't want to sort of read out the whole GSPO to you, but there's broadly into 3 categories. So supervision planning, supervision of specific users, and then lifeguards and management of lifeguards, essentially. I think Alex covering off the definition of supervision, but broadly there's a bit about, it defines what supervision is. If you were to define supervision in one paragraph, it's that section SV 2.3.2. That's the one that keeps getting rolled out, and yes, it probably needs a little bit of refinement and strengthening, I think, as we move forward. And if you go through a sort of a case study in there, so if you just took one thing out, risk management, you know, it's tied to a process, the ISO risk management guidelines, and you know, it looks at things like physical factors, people factors, activity factors, noting there's a bit of overlap between those. And so, you know, you kind of need to go through as part of that process. I'm just giving you one case study example out of the GSPO. You go through all of the physical elements, you know, glare, refraction, line of sight barriers, etc. You look at the people who's interacting in that space. Is the activity structured or unstructured? Do they require additional care, the supervision of an adult guardian? Are they a vulnerable swimmer in some capacity? And then you look at the kind of activities that they're doing. Are they doing some sort of vigorous exercise? Is it likely to exacerbate some sort of pre-existing medical condition, etc.? And then you sort of overlay those, the Venn diagram there of those 3 sort of risk factors, and then that your risk profile is somewhere in the middle. It's looking at the user, what the user's doing and where they're doing that to kind of work out what that risk profile is and how that plays out in practicality is, you know, we know when swimming lessons are happening, there's lots of kids running around, and we put an extra lifeguard on, and we split up the zoning, right? So it's kind of like following that through logically, but just making sure that you go through a robust process to arrive at your decision, not just kind of picking up the plan that was there. I'm in the job now, the guy before me or the girl before me said it should be this, so I won't think it through. This is a guide on how to think that through, make sure that it's actually right. That's it for me, thank you.
No, thank you, RJ. So as we know, yeah, the GSPO is a massive document, and for those who are in a leadership role, as you develop from a lifeguard into those roles, you kind of get a bit of a shock factor when you realise how massive it is. But as we mentioned, today's basically, yeah, specifically on supervision. So if anything, yeah, that's where everything amounts from, is from the GSPO, where everything gets developed. And even just from that presentation, RJ, I didn't realise how much extra work in the background actually gets done in developing that kind of document. So it's kind of enlightening in that sense. From here, as RJ mentioned, there's going to be a few updates to the training recommendation. We've got Andy coming through to, I guess, inform us on the changes that are coming up, particularly involving around swim teachers and swim schools. So if, Andy, if you want to come on through and come through where the differences lie, or what's coming through to assist in those kind of spaces.
Thanks, Chris. Morning, everyone, and thank you again for your for your attendance and to the team for putting today together. I want to start just with sort of two statements, which is something that we should take pride in, but also be very cautious of. So the first one is that we've never had a fatal drowning of a child at any Watch Around Water endorsed facility. Now, there's over 200 facilities. The program's been going for almost 15 years. Hopefully most of you guys have got the endorsement. And we get 75 million visits a year to council-owned pools. Okay, so we are talking over 1 billion visits. Now that's a massive achievement. I know not everyone here has been involved for 15 years, but that is a massive achievement. It's also something that we need to be very, very mindful of into the future, because we've proven that we can stop these incidences. And as we know, one of the coroners said, no one should ever drown in a public pool. Okay, so they're very, very clear that drownings are preventable by definition. So what we do works. It is complicated, it is confusing, it is hard to do properly. It's easy to do it half-assed, but it's very difficult to do it properly and to make sure it's in play. But we carry that exposure, those 75 million visits a year, and as the parent of a 6-year-old, my kid's an absolute liability. And I'm sure there's parents in here as well, or you've got nieces or nephews, or you are lifeguards and you see these 4, 5, 6-year-olds, 7, whatever the case may be, they're completely oblivious. They're having so much fun, okay, but it's something that we need to be very cautious of, and we'll have a look at Watch Around Water a little bit later on. More broadly, as an industry, we haven't had a fatal drowning death at a council-owned facility for 7 years. Okay, again, if you look at the 75 million visits a year, we are starting to approach, or we will in the next couple of years get towards 1 billion visits without a fatal drowning. So again, it's a testament to everybody and to our predecessors, and hopefully we can continue to build a platform for everyone that comes along after us. But I want to cover off very, very quickly pool lifeguards and swim teachers, because when it hits the fan, it's very, very objective. Did you have rescue equipment? Did you have signage, etc., etc.? It always then comes down to that crux of supervision. That's what the conversation comes down to, and that's the subjective piece. Okay, it's not objective in the same manner that some of the other pieces are, and that's why we need to be a little bit mindful about it. Probably a few of the gaps that exist, particularly outside of those council pools. So firstly, I don't intend on patronising anybody in the room, but I want to be really, really clear that when we talk about supervision, the supervision offered by a lifeguard and the supervision offered by a swim teacher are very, very different. The why is different, the position descriptions are completely different, the supervision contribution that they make are completely different. And a sweeping statement of our swim teachers are our lifeguards is not going to cut it. The skills and knowledge are different, the qualifications are different, the onboarding is different, the in-service requirements are different, the health and fitness checks, all different. Okay? So that's not to say that you can't have, if you, let's just say one of the pools you open for swimming lessons at 6 o'clock in the morning, the first hour it's just swimming lessons. Okay? If your swim teachers are qualified as lifeguards and it's written into your risk assessment, your supervision plan, that's okay. But if you are just running with swim teachers, okay, without getting into a few gory examples, it's not going to cut it in the event of a worst case scenario. And the reason ultimately comes down to the base level of training. So these are the two courses. I've got rid of all the numbers and acronyms and all those sorts of things and just simplified it as much as possible. There's only one part of the course that's the same. Okay, and that's the basic water rescue. So what we sort of, the talk, reach, throw, wade, the very, very basic stuff that we're teaching the kids in bronze medallion and then the lifeguards, that is the only part of the course that is the same. Outside of the actual training course, we obviously know that both swim teachers and pool lifeguards have to have that CPR unit, so that's a crossover as well. But that's where the similarities end, and that's the reason that you can't just say the swim teachers are the lifeguards. Okay? The swim teachers might be offering supervision. They might be the only ones offering supervision, but you can't just say the swim teachers are lifeguards. Okay? There was an incident probably 3-4 years ago now, not a not a very pleasant one. It was at a learn to swim facility. It involved a spinal incident. And advanced water rescues, which you and I refer to as essentially spinal management, there was no one there with the skill set. So how do you deal with the spinal? It's not rocket science, the spinal management stuff, but it's got to be done properly. The principles of spinal management, where to start, who does what, the advice grip, all those sort of techniques that, that we do as robots, and the only confusion is whether you're coming from the right or the left. There was no one there who could do it. There was a spinal board up on the wall, but no one knew how to use it. Okay, unfortunately in that instance, the child had to stay in the water till the emergency services arrived. And the techniques that we used were very, very different to the ones that we teach on the course and the ones that hopefully you're practicing at your in-service. Okay, so that's just one very, very simple example of why the training is different. So just be mindful of that. We are in the midst of a training package change, okay? So there is one that will be coming in November. The only change for that one is that is the actual prereq. So there's a new first aid which came in about 18 months ago. We will bridge that difference in the course. Okay, so what that means is that your team can go with their current first aid certificate, or if they get one in the next couple of weeks or couple of months, we can take the older one or the current one. They can come to a pool lifeguard course. We will bridge the difference in that course. Okay, so your lifeguards, probably the vast majority of them, will not have to worry about what I'm talking about. Okay, we will deal with that on the course, and we will make sure that by the time they finish the course, they have the newer first aid qualification, and obviously their updated or their new pool lifeguard qualification. There is a further change that's a bit further down the track, so we're probably 18 months out from that one. There'll be a few tweaks to bits and pieces, but the key change will be probably the oxygen resuscitation. So we'll do some more work on that. We will have an industry group to sit on. We'll sort of redesign or rebuild the pool lifeguard course to a degree, noting that fundamentally a pool lifeguard hasn't changed in 10, 20, 30, 40 years, what the expectations are. But we will have an industry group as well to make sure that that is where we land on that course is viable. Just two other quick reminders. This e-learning is now freely available to LSV trained pool lifeguards and swim teachers on the portal. So at the portal where they book the courses and all those other things, this is all there and it's all free for those people to assist in PD. We know that we're a bit light on staff, and getting in-service training up and running is a bit tricky. So this stuff is all available, which is really, really positive. And also just on the shortage, SRV, for anyone who's not across, just launched the Youth Aquatic Accreditation Program. Okay, so swim teacher training is free under the program for eligible facilities. Okay, so the new swim teacher course, or the swim teacher course, is covered. The teacher, infant and toddler extension is covered, and license renewals are covered under the funding. Okay, the funding goes to facilities, not to the providers. Okay, so you just need to check your eligibility. As a facility, you need to contact us for a quote, submit your application to SRV, and then we'll work through the delivery of the training. So please, we only introduced the swim teacher course about 2.5 years ago, so we don't have 24 trainers like we do for pool lifeguards. So please get in early for that one, because we really want to be up and running by summer. We know it's going to be another big year. We know we're going to have millions and millions of people through the door, and we want it to be a really, really safe summer. So that's it for me. If you have any questions for myself or any of the training team, I'm happy to pull them up from downstairs in any of the breaks. And again, just thanks to everyone for coming.
No, thank you, Andy. Yeah, so I guess some information changes that will come through, as well as those first aid updates, which is actually a really good initiative to have that bridging gap, rather than going out to renew and try to get those updates prior to a pool lifeguard course. To have that bridge just, I guess, helps the streamline of us, where we're already impacted with staffing issues, and let alone trying to have people to go and try renew their qualifications where we might already be short on deck. Next thing coming on I want to invite is Emily Down from Yarra Leisure. She's going to come in particularly highlighting, I guess, supervision planning and training that and how we bring that in. Emily comes in with a great passion with this initiative. I came down, visited her site, and yeah, there's a lot of passion and care in everything that she does, as well as the other presenters. Like I've gone through and visited sites, and that's what they're coming in. It's a lot of passion and care in what they do. They do things slightly differently, and this is where we have this networking part, is to gather that information and whatever you can kind of grasp, that you can be like, yes, I can probably implement that in our systems, or that might actually help us out. So again, it's all about development and those opportunities. So Emily, if you'd like to come down and present on the training and implementation.
Thank you. Good morning. So I'm Emily. I'm the Lifeguard team leader at Yarra Leisure. I'm part of that role. I'm responsible for the implementation and development of our supervision plans. So it's a fun, challenging task, as discussed already. For those of you that aren't familiar with Yarra Leisure, just to give a bit of insight, it might relate to some of your facilities. We are a 3-facility organisation, and each of our facilities are quite different in the demographics and what happens in our facilities. So we really do have to challenge that and make our supervision plans unique. But at the same time, we also deal with the challenge of, we have a staffing group of about 80 to 120 lifeguards and 30 to 40 duty managers, depending on where we are with our recruitment processes, that work across all of our facilities. So for us, one of our biggest challenges is going from having those really detailed, meticulously planned, dot-pointed from the GSBO guidelines, supervision plans, and how we implement them to a casual workforce that, you know, are getting disrupted with COVID and have university and other priorities that they want to focus on, and how we draw that back to the day-to-day and go from really detailed plans to day-to-day for casual workplaces. So probably I'm just going to discuss 3 of our biggest implementation and development challenges that we've had when doing our supervision plan. And RJ spoke earlier about, you know, the steps involved in creating a supervision plan is one thing, and, you know, cross-checking all of our risk assessments and going through the GSBOs is one of the biggest challenges. But from there, it's probably how we transfer that knowledge. So looking at us, our first big challenge was having these large detailed documents and a casual workforce and COVID, and, you know, how are we communicating and transferring the knowledge so that it's not just my passion and it's not just in my head, but how we get that to our casual workforce. Our next big challenge was, after we had completed those steps and started to communicate and train our staff, was, you know, just the day-to-day challenges, distracted lifeguards, poor body language of lifeguards, you know, patrolling and scanning, and how we impacted that and changed that. And then finally, how do we know that our lifeguards are effectively supervising the pool, and how are we measuring this as a success? So going to that first one of how do we communicate and transfer this knowledge to our lifeguard and duty manager teams, this is hopefully really familiar to everyone. Our supervision plans are built into our lifeguard and duty manager inductions. We've got posters all around the facilities. They're easily accessible, the deployment plans. And, you know, we include them in our weekly team communications, what updates we're having. And then the obvious one is we address issues as we see them, and having those, you know, repetitive. My ATO bill was very easy to claim my phone bill, because 90% of my conversations are with staff, having those follow-up conversations. But addressing those issues individually as they happened. However, we're finding, even with doing all these things, and hopefully they are really familiar to everyone here, we were still having issues. And, you know, we've got our beautiful duty manager team leader demonstrating this is all acting, but some really common sites that probably, and unfortunately, are probably familiar to everyone. Lifeguards looking for opportunities to talk, lifeguards leaning and looking disengaged and not watching the water and just being really static. So we're finding that even with doing all these implementations and training, we're still having problems. So we had to go back and look at the problem of, where are we missing, where's the gap, where are we going to build this into our training plans. And for us, we looked at our in-service training, and that's a quarterly training. It's mandatory. We know lifeguards and duty managers need to attend it. So how can we build our supervision plan into our quarterly trainings? And we at Yarra, we do our quarterly trainings. They're run by our duty manager team, so it's that really safe, psychological safe environment for people to bounce off ideas and create a safe learning environment for the lifeguards. So we started asking questions. Any Ted Lasso fans? Just a shout out to the show. We were curious and we tried not to be judgmental when we asked these questions to find out, why are lifeguards doing what they're doing? Was it a lack of understanding, or was it a gap in our training? So we found that out, and one of the biggest challenges for us in around distractions was talking. And why are lifeguards talking? And for us, it actually came down to boredom. Too many lifeguards does not always equal better supervision. And you can see these pictures here. We were really fixated, 2 bodies of water, 2 lifeguards need to be on pool deck at all times. But really what that was creating when we collaborated with the lifeguards and the duty managers was we were just creating an environment of complacency and boredom, because we had 6 people in a pool and 2 lifeguards watching. And for that wasn't working for us. So we had to go back and look and determine, 2 lifeguards maybe isn't always better supervision, and creating new plans on how we can safely close pools if we don't have people in them and still maintain that really effective supervision. We also looked at this in terms of our Learn to Swim, and when we have 3 lifeguards on pool deck for Learn to Swim programs, and do we need all of those lifeguards to be supervising, or do we look at having 2 lifeguards on pool deck and that 3rd one having those challenging watch around water conversations and doing all those things that disrupt our supervision? So that was another step where, and I know Alex is probably going to talk later, and Andy, about our 10 seconds to identify and 20 seconds to respond, but we had to look at it, and having more lifeguards on pool deck didn't mean we were identifying things earlier. So maybe we're looking at now 12 seconds to identify and 18 seconds to respond, but playing around with that so that we are looking at how can we effectively create the best supervision. Of course, though, that didn't work, and we included it in our supervision plans, but we still would come back to these situations, and you couldn't have summed up. It's a really difficult job to do ongoing and to continue to have that repetition. So for us, this is still a feature of our day-to-day lives, and we had lifeguards talking. So we had to now look at, we're including it when we induct our staff, we're including it in our quarterly trainings, and supervision is that constant topic. But how do we get the key messages we want to include from our supervision plan into our day-to-day audits, day-to-day environment, and really bring that to the forefront of lifeguards' minds when they're on pool deck? And for us, and one of the things we came to was our mystery guest visits. And, how do we know that lifeguards are effectively supervising the pool? And we look at our DM feedback and our shift reports, and then we look at our own observations when we're on pool deck. But we also have our mystery guest visits, and we were finding when LSV were coming in and doing their mystery guest visits, they're really showing what we're doing at the time we're doing it. It's not just when a manager's on site. So we started to look at, and going back to that, how do we get lifeguards to bring their supervision plan to the forefront and bring that really meticulous document of 40 pages or however long it is, 3 facilities that they've got to remember, back to the front of their mind. And for us, that was mini daily audits where, we go out on pool deck and we ask the lifeguards, what are your biggest concerns? What's your area that you're supervising at the moment? Who's your highest risk patient? And we get those questions and those key priorities that we want to draw from our supervision plan to the forefront of their mind. So this is something that we have implemented over the last few months, and we've already seen quite a lot of success, and it's quite satisfying. The first time we asked lifeguards what area they're supervising, we might have found a little bit of a gap between what we'd originally trained and what they were doing. But then we could go back the next time in 2 weeks and audit them again, and they'd be able to answer those questions, and they're starting to think of who their biggest risks are in the water and what areas they're supervising. So we found that to be a really useful method of how we're implementing our supervision plan into our day-to-day practices. And then for those of you that are team leaders, it's probably you've noticed over COVID, it's very easy to get drawn into the day-to-days, and finding that time to to observe. And when you don't have that tangible effect, you can't really just go walk out onto pool deck for 15 minutes because you've got nothing to show for it. So we used iAuditor as our program, and it's just starting to create those really detailed, what is actually happening in our centre. And we're now getting that really clear picture that we know our lifeguards know their stuff because they're able to answer these questions and answer our key priorities. So we looked at and this is something that we're continually reviewing, and like what are we focusing on? Are we focusing on the right things? If you haven't done this process already and it's not part of your day-to-day activities, I'd really look at making your own mini internal audit. The mystery guest visits are a great start of using some of their questions. I hope that's okay. Andy, I know you said we compete on everything except safety, so using those mystery guest visits and then looking at your supervision plans and figuring out what is it that you want your lifeguards to know and what do you want them to have at the forefront of their mind, and having that as day-to-day questions that we're asking. So for us, it was they need to know what area they're responsible for. They need to be free from distraction. They need to be mobile and roving. They need to understand the scanning profiles and recognize a person in distress. They need to have that safety and rule enforcement, need to know about rotations and handovers, and they need to be getting done correctly. Have that positive body language that's not only going to, be a customer service factor, but also how we present ourselves and how we're alert on pool deck. And then our admin, it needs to be getting done, our head counts, our area checks, our daily checks, and our being rescue ready, bum bag checks and correct uniforms. So that's kind of a little bit, they're probably the three big things that we've really been working on and how we've been working on getting a successful supervision plan implemented. But as part of that risk development, we're always assessing and we are looking at what's next. So what's next? Oh, sorry, I'm going on holidays next week, but that's not what's next for Yarra Leisure. We are looking to seek feedback from us. So we're currently seeking feedback. So we're currently in our operations in Service 3 training session, and one of our standing agenda items is our supervision plan. And specifically this time we're looking at how do we divide the pools, and is the way that we've divided the pools from a nerdy, passionate team leader decision that researches and finds out the quickest way to reach people, is that practically what 100 casual lifeguards are going to do in their minds? So we're asking those questions, and it may likely lead to change in the way we divide our pools. We're continuing to review and develop our internal audits and observation processes, and just going back to, are the questions we're asking on staff the questions that we want staff to know and have at the forefront of their mind? And then targeting those areas of our mystery guest visits and our observations that we're not consistent with. So for us, and it might be familiar with a few people here, our rotations are too short and our handovers are too long. We're not talking when we need to, and we're talking for too long when we're doing those handovers. So that's going to be another real key priority for us. And probably the way we can do it is it's one thing to do it with us and as a planning team, and ops, we have a planning team of 4, but we're really going to be looking at our duty managers and the important role they play as shift supervisors to how they drive that culture, and are also bringing them into this process of asking lifeguards who's their biggest risk and getting that back to the forefront of everyone's mind. So I just want to finish with what's next for you. So hopefully you've learned something, or you've considered something that I've mentioned today that you can bring into your own practices. Maybe it is that you're already doing this plus some, and the next thing for you is to get up here and save me and be the next one presenting on what to do. So I'll leave that there. Thank you.
No, thank you, Emily. That was, really well delivered. So I guess we're going to come back and we'll reverse back into that. So that was kind of like, how do we implement, again, what I mentioned, that documentation to reflect out on pool deck. Alec will come in on how to develop stuff. Now, what we know as an industry, and from those that I've kind of visited, networking, had conversations with, is we're in a period of turnover, but we're in a period of upskilling people. We've lost quality, we've lost knowledge within our industry. So for those that are hopefully particularly new to their roles, whether you're a duty manager that stepped up as a supervisor, coordinator, and so forth, that you take this as an opportunity to develop yourself. Get that extra information to be like, you know what, this is probably the key information I was missing in my role right now that I can start putting in. I know that within my personal time and leisure, I was put in the deep end. And that was even as a duty manager, where my first ever solo shift, I had no chlorine in my tank for an outdoor pool on a 40-degree day, and I thought the best way for me to keep that pool open was to continuously dose dry chemicals into the balance tank. Again, that was for me being thrown into the deep end. I was underdeveloped and underskilled. So from that day, I decided to go through and continuously develop myself. And from there was going to the supervision. I'm like, oh, I'm lost. Where's the information that I need? This is the perfect forum. So again, I hope you try and take the information as it comes. I feel like there's going to be a bit of overlap as it comes, which is very positive in the way we're going to go. So the next part we're going to go to is what we're going to call barriers to effective supervision. Now, there are numerous barriers that we need to overcome that we document within our risk management plans. All right, whether that be our physical barriers within our pool design, glare is a big one, all right, indoor and outdoor facilities, you know, refraction, all right, as well as pool disturbance. And there's one other barrier to effective supervision that we'll enlighten on as we go. But before I start, I was kind of rude and forgot to kind of officially introduce myself for those that might be new in the room. My name is Christopher Rivera, Projects Coordinator for Lifesaving Victoria. Started out pretty much almost 3 years now as a pool safety assessor, so quite a few familiar faces in the room, and some not so familiar, but I hope to still go out on my site visits and continue to network. All right, the only way that I'm going to be able to facilitate my role is to get more of an understanding of your facilities and understand what your needs are into relaying the information that we feel like will be valuable for you. So what we're going to look at is our 4 standard barriers and then one extra barrier that might be affecting us all in different ways. One of the main barriers that we have to effective supervision that we know of is our physical barriers. All right, our pool design, our pillars, you know, the feature walls, raised bulkheads, the seating that we have in our arrangements, and just anything else, you know, water slides, that's going to affect our vision or the lifeguard's vision on pool deck. And we know when we have those obstacles that the best way to overcome those is by moving effectively. But it's all great in saying, yes, you've got to go through and rove. Why are they roving? You know, what is it that they're trying to overcome? And by them understanding the physical barriers to know that, you know, we're going to be hidden behind certain structures is to then implement, as Emily mentioned, you know, our 10-second scanning arrangement, being aware of our area or zone to know that we've got everything covered. So that's the one big barrier that we've got, and that's all dependent on your own independent facilities. Now, there are some blessed, I'm going to say literally blessed facilities that have no physical structures whatsoever. They've got an open plain pool deck and supervision is easy from that. All right, other luxurious facilities, barriers galore. All right, especially for those with splash park features. You know, you cannot see everything in one spot, so that's why we encourage, you know, that roving and moving. But again, it's how do we encourage that, why we're doing it to our lifeguards on pool deck. You know, as we mentioned, this would be a nightmare to try and figure out everyone who's in that pool. All right, rapid river, raised bulkheads, all right, disturbance in the water. You know, there's actually another thermal spa down on that side there. So this is actually a facility in Sydney that I stole it from. So if you can imagine that, to try to put that in and implement that in a supervision plan would just be an absolute nightmare. But these are the parts that we've got to overcome to make sure we continue our great run that we have in Victoria of 0 fatal drownings within Victoria so far. This is where the biggest part is that I want us to take this takeaway. We're in a really good spot at the moment. Our challenge is to keep it there. Glare. We all know about glare, all right? Natural glare, all right, that sunlight coming in, hitting parts of the pool at different times of the day, our outdoor pools, all right? Glare has different factors, all right? It is distracting, it's discomforting, it disables you, and also has the chance of blindness if you get that impact there. So if you have that heavy glare and you have not recognised that, especially in our outdoor facilities, which is why we encourage our sunglasses from out there, to try and supervise while you're half blind, squinting, trying to be like, I'm pretty sure I can see that guy over there, I'm not entirely sure. All right, again, It's about that moving, roving, being understanding of our environmental factors in order to be able to have that effective supervision. Again, this is stuff that we know, right? But how do we encourage the lifeguards to understand how this can affect the supervision and where we can actually see where our swimmers or our participants are? All right. Outdoor facilities are just daunting into that. All right. Now imagine we've got a bit of disturbance there. We've got the glare. How would you be able to differentiate a body or a shadow in those lane markings? All right. If that was to be worst case scenario, that's what we're looking at. All right. Are those barriers? You know, kids, they go through. They will dive up in underwater in case something happens. If they wanted to go through, you know, the hypoxia around. How will we differentiate a lane marker to a shadow? Refraction, a bit of scientific bit into that. All right, the way it works is light reflecting onto the position into where we think something isn't actually in that spot. Could be further out, could be closer in, could be deeper than we thought. This would be more in, I guess, worst case scenario, or trying to differentiate. Again, is it a person, has someone just lost their shirt? How far away are they? How close are they to me in case they need anything? All right. This is where, again, is those key positioning in order to have effective supervision. Now, refraction and the biggest nightmare, which I'm sure, hopefully, I know there's some facilities that have these underwater activities, underwater hockeys, underwater rugby. It is heart palpitating. All right. You're having people hold their breath to an extended period of time, getting pretty physical underneath the water. All right? I know the first time when I actually witnessed some of this stuff, I could not try to actually differentiate where the bodies were at any particular point in time. All right? Particularly, you know, first time that I had those palpitations when I was down at Maroon de Leisure in their 5 metre dive pool there, and they've got underwater rugby. Now, 5 metres deep, and they're holding their breath for an extended period of time. It is so difficult to try and see where they are at a point in time. They all just look like blurs. All right? You don't even know how many actually bodies are actually under there until the point that they're all come up, they're up taking their breath, and you're like, okay, there's nobody else down there, we're good. All right? But yeah, this is where refraction actually gets a bit daunting with those underwater activities, and it is a challenge. All right? If any lifeguard that said that they're relaxed during these activities, I've got to say they're lying, because I'm pretty well experienced, and even I still get heart palpitations when I see this stuff. So again, these are all barriers that we know. They're simple, but again, sometimes there's the simple stuff that we miss. So we need to go through and consider this. Again, it's all about facility design, the activities that you have, and how do we educate the lifeguards out on pool deck to be aware of what they're doing, what they're needing to watch out for. Again, it's educating the why. How do we get that done? Now, we have our last one. All right, disturbance all comes in numerous features. All right, lazy rivers, wave pools, slide parks, water slides, hydro pools, swimmers, squad swimmers. There's a reason why, okay, other than like trying to tick off the old man in the swim lane when kids are trying to cross their lanes. All right, there's a big difference. They make disturbance in the water. All right, kid comes under, you know, get a kick in the foot, not really going to see it because of that disturbance there. All right, about moving, being aware where the blind spots are in particular disturbing points of water. You know, again, another nightmare. All right, we're going to go through and have this structure design where we've got a raised bulkhead with a water feature with glare intermitting at the same time. That's 3 barriers in one. 3 sets of blindness that a lifeguard needs to overcome. So again, this is where adequate scanning comes in. Not only scanning, but head counts. All right, knowing who's with what, again, watch around water, all that sort of stuff. Again, it's everything that we know, but again, it's the simple stuff that get missed. All right, so hopefully, if we come in and we're confident in our facility design, then we're pretty good at implementing a strong supervision plan and introducing the why and the how to our lifeguards out on pool deck. Now, the next one, all right, those are our 4 main barriers. The 5th one is definitely probably the most daunting one, especially to effective supervision out on pool deck. All right, distractions. Distractions can hinder and actually create fatalities should it occur. All right. Now, as Emily mentioned, it is a barrier that they're having to overcome with their team on pool deck, and I'm sure many barriers for everyone out on their centres. All right. talking out on pool deck, looking up at the ceiling, looking down at the feet. Where are they actually looking, or what are they actually even thinking about? Comes in different forms, all right? Changing pool signs, moving the boom, changing lane ropes. All those task-orientated stuff are all distractions of lifeguards from their actual point of supervision. Watch around water conversations, those small conversations that they have with their seniors in the hydro pool. Now, I'm not saying to take that away. Lifeguards need to establish that rapport and get to know who they're coming in, because that makes it a more comfortable, inviting environment for everyone that comes in. All right? But again, there's an ultimate job to do, and that's to keep everyone safe within the facilities. Mental distractions as well. All right? Please be aware that we're at a point where everything's just gotten so busy. My mind is going at 100 miles an hour. Every time, driving up in the car, I'm going down doing the shopping. I'm supposed to be concentrating on the shopping, but I'm concentrating on what I'm supposed to be doing, at work next week. When I'm at work, I'm thinking about what I'm trying to do on the weekend. So if I'm distracted just in an office role, what about your lifeguards? I know definitely in this point it strikes a boredom. I'm trying to think about, okay, where could I go on holiday next while I'm out on pool deck? I'm sure many of us were out on pool deck, we're trying to plan our next holiday while we're walking around on pool deck. All right? Mental distractions can actually take away from a lot. And again, probably some social distractions as well comes along. I really do hope that we don't catch any lifeguards out on their phones while on pool deck, because that would be a very interesting conversation. Again, as mentioning, the mind wandering. All right, I've had people out on pool deck when I've gone through and asked the guards, how are you going? All right, because they're scanning an empty pool. We've been there, we've done that, it's hard, and they told me how many tiles there were at the bottom of the pool. All right. Again, distracting up into that. How do we know that while they're counting the tiles, that a toddler hasn't just run away from the parents and straight into the pool? If we get so amidst and focused on something when distracted, anything else that would happen situationally, we just wouldn't know about. All right. And this actually happened at a stint down up in Gumbaya World while I was there. All right, had one of the lifeguards, honestly dazed out. All right, just went through to go through, do my normal checks. Up in the thing, next thing I know, this kid has come running out of the locker room straight into 1.4 metre water. All right, I saw the child run, lifeguard missed it, there's the kid sunk in the bottom. It was actually a parent that actually had raised it aware. All right, again, that mind wandering. All right, I actually went in and got the child up into there. All right, distractions can be fatal. All right, but we need to make sure that we have ways to overcome that. Again, task distractions. All right, it has been proven, and we'll go over to that task distractions can be fatal. All right, again, we do have a lot of mind admin tasks that we do ask our lifeguards to do. Head checks, for one. All right, temperature checks, changing the signs for when the activities come in, lane ropes, booms, etc. But we should have risk management in place on how we can actually assist the lifeguards to overcome these distractions and make sure that the pool is still adequately supervised. And this is where we know it has happened and where distractions have been fatal. All right, 2 coronal cases that we have, and the key bit here is that both were preventable, both could have avoided with adequate training, and both occurred either due to a lack of understanding and communication amongst their team. Both cases. I've read both these cases probably at least a dozen times each, and every time I read them, there's something new. All right, so if you have not gone into, take note of the case numbers there. If you have not gone into these case numbers, I highly suggest you read those. You and your team will be better for it, especially leading into what I would feel, as Andy mentioned, a heavy summer. All right, we're into a point where things are rambling. We're in a roll, momentum's coming, we're getting busier. I do feel like this summer is going to be particularly heavy. All right, so this is where adequate supervision needs to come in. As mentioned, we're in a really good spot where we are statistically in regard to fatal drownings. We want to keep it there. Now, some reference points from these coroner reports, all right, found that the lifeguards were all distracted by the difficulties they were experiencing with seating home the boom at the deep end of the 50-metre pool. Distracted by their task. All right, was there adequate supervision? Did people know who was supervising what? Either way, it was found that they were distracted by that task. found that the lifeguard was distracted with the activity and that he was not designated responsibility to supervise the 50-metre pool. Again, lack of communication and distraction is where we ended up with a fatal incident. Notwithstanding her belief she was unhindered in performing her duties, her evidence suggests that she was distracted. Again, this is all coroner reports from fatal incidences that happened in the case numbers was due to the fact that they were distracted. Lifeguard supervising Mr. Guideline at the time was seen distracted by her attempts to secure a bum bag. Securing a bum bag she was distracted with that led to missing of a fatal incident. Something so simple that we take for granted. Trying to go through and put in a bum bag or a lost radio. And the final bit there, nevertheless, the lifeguard should not have been distracted and should have been washed in the water. Take that home. Yeah? Our number one priority is those that are coming into the facility, making sure they come in, they enjoy the time, and they leave home safely. Now, distractions happen not just only in the public pool, all right, happens on the road as well. Thus, me probably clogging up the Monash this morning, all right, driver behind me, clearly distracted. All right, I could actually see it in the rearview mirror that it was actually going to happen, and I braced myself for impact. All right, but braking the car in front of me, I could clearly see what was happening there, and bam. Before coming through here, all right, for those that were late, I apologise. All right, I did try to prevent the incident, but it happened. All right. Now, on distractions, there's a personal history that I've come in to get, to understand this more. All right, my experiences come from lifeguarding in overseas where I had an influx of more than 4,000 people on a cruise ship to come into an island. All right, and at that point in time, our responsibility is to make sure that all those 4,000 people got on that boat. Now, there were times that in my time over there, I had 5 incidences that I was a part of that unfortunately they weren't able to return home. Now that, it hit a lot of us, but 3 of those were unpreventable because they were medical conditions. The other 2, unfortunately, were due to these points of distraction and unfortunately my team not doing what they needed to do. Our emergency response was spot on, but it could have been prevented had they been on point. All right, and as well, as a cruise line, all right, it's so hard, all right, that little pool that we had there, big screen, movies, entertainment, stage shows, everything there was so difficult as a lifeguard to go through and make sure that all those kids that are rambling and running away from their parents, the boozy adults there, kids, go do whatever you want, the lifeguard has you. It's even the same here at our pools. The lifeguard has you, go along. All right, so we need to go through and make sure we're educating the parents as well, but it was so hard not to be distracted on those nights. Unfortunately, even though those shallow pool, be surprised how many times I had to go through and jump in and actually drag a kid out of the water. But again, distractions are everywhere, but how do we overcome those within our team? Teamwork and training, we can overcome those distractions. Now, does everyone have those notebooks in front of you? Cool. For everyone that is a lifeguard in the room, I want you to note down a few points. How could my leader help me be less distracted on pool deck? And as leaders, I want you to write down a few notes. How could you help your lifeguards be a little less distracted on pool deck? Now, I'm not saying we're going to go through and implement this tomorrow. These are just little notes that we can go through and take away that we can probably slowly go into a centre. So reflect on your teams, as lifeguards or anyone who you might be under your supervisor. Reflect on how your team leader could help you as leaders, duty managers, or those that are covering off pool deck. How could you help your team be a little distracted? All right, I'll give you a few minutes on those. For those leaders in the room who don't have your lifeguards here, use that as that question. As myself, how can I help you be successful out on pool deck? And as lifeguards, what could you give recommendations to your team on how they can help you be successful up on pool deck? Now, I asked the question earlier on how many lifeguards we have in the room. All right, there were a few hands. As soon as I mentioned having those leaders and duty managers that are lifeguard qualified, everyone's hands got raised. So essentially everyone here in a position of operations I would hope, would be have that lifeguard. Now, what we need to do as some leaders is, I guess, sometimes in my own position, I did the same thing when I was out on pool deck. I had to remind myself where I started. I started as a lifeguard, doing my wander on pool deck, making sure everyone was in the water, all right, all safe and incident. All right, moved up into a duty manager role, and all of a sudden, okay, now I'm overseeing it, and I kind of lost my way a bit. All right, it wasn't until I got back in my supervision role that I'm like, you know what, I was just like that. All right, I was the lifeguard down on pool deck, so I need to go through and think about the guards. Now, the best feedback that you can get from your team is to just ask them the simple question: how can I help you? What is it on pool deck that would help you be more successful in your role? What resources could we facilitate you with? What way could you be less distracted on pool deck when you need to do tasks? Could it be as simple as, again, this is what it's theory, we train our teams to do it all the time. Does it happen? Asking your duty manager to cover you if you're distracted in a conversation, or divert the conversation out to your duty manager or your leader. I actually want to go through and reflect all right, we're in a shortage. I know most of us do. We'll go through and cover lifeguards out on pool deck. But if we were fully resourced and we had a full team, all right, of lifeguards and duty managers, as team leaders and coordinators, would you still go out there and supervise on pool deck? If you said yes, then you're on your way into making sure that you've set the standard for your team. I know for myself in that leadership part, the best way to get my team to do what I was asking them to do was to help display that. All right, actually go out there and, ask them, again, if we can, supervise the area before having prolonged conversations. All right, we still want this water supervised. All right, if not, bring them to the office and be like, okay, what can we do to help? What do you need? All right, it's having that understanding and approach and that teamwork engagement that we're working on the same goal. Again, supervision is everything we do in the back that's reflected out on pool deck. It's everyone's responsibility. But again, every time we bring up the topic of supervision, everyone just thinks of the lifeguards and what's happening out there. All right, we need to remember the background stuff and remembering that they're at the forefront and what they see matters. What we have on paper doesn't always work out on pool deck. Theoretically, we're like, this is the best plan in the world, it's going to work. And then all of a sudden you get your lifeguards and they're not doing what you need them to do. And you're like, okay, well, I need you to do this, need you to do this. And they'll do it, but does that actually work? If things aren't working the way that it's on paper, ask your team, does it actually work? What could work better? Have it as a team priority to do that, and you'll find that performance should increase out on pool deck because they then have an involvement on that safety around with everyone there. All right? So hopefully some few takeaways. I know that there was a bit of a brief enlightenment there. This was kind of heavy hitting, but again, we're going to come into, again, what I feel as a heavy summer, and we need to alleviate those distractions of what's to come, and making sure that we stay at our healthy spot of zero fatal drownings and not have history repeat due to distractions. Oh, cool. Again, thank you everyone for your time listening out on that one. We're going to go through and finish off with Alec, who will come through with the topic of situational awareness. This is a big key factor, making sure that we can actually probably foresee events before they occur, and I think that's going to be the big hitting topic.
Thank you, Chris, and good morning. I'm actually your second last, your second last presentation before morning tea. So I hope I can hit on some interesting points. My name's Alec Olszewski. I'm the Manager of Aquatic Industry Services here at Lifesaving Victoria. It's a pleasure to put this type of event on for you, and I just want to thank Chris, despite the fact that he got rear-ended on the way in on the Monash here this morning, for putting this whole event together. So thank you very much, Chris. I'm going to talk about situational awareness this morning, and I think it's potentially a skill that's under recognised for lifeguards. And I'm also very aware that we have some facilities here with us in the room today that don't actively have lifeguards in the true sense of the word, in that they don't have active lifeguards on deck, but they do have lifeguard trained personnel in their management group. And if you don't, that really is the starting point that we're advocating for here today as LSV. We think and we believe, and it is recognised, that that skill set is fundamental in and around public swimming pools in order to respond to incidents. And I think everybody in the room will recognise and advocate for the regular and ongoing training of lifeguards, both for their physical and mental preparation, as it is a highly important job. And also, we all, I think, are in agreement that lifeguards should participate in the minimum 4 organised training sessions per year to ensure maintenance of their skill set and their competencies. And since the uptake of that in the latest iteration of the GSPO 2019, I think most facilities are now doing that. And those training sessions, they do need to cover off the following things, and I'm just going to say them, even though even though you've probably all heard these before, but that's changes and updates to local procedures, revision and practice of emergency procedures, facility evacuation procedures, practice in supervision and rescue, first aid for their specific environments, public relations and communication, conflict management and teamwork. And the other key point at the bottom here is other soft skills. And situational awareness is a soft skill that I'm going to talk to today in some detail. One of the reasons that the lifeguard skill set is the minimum qualification set is that nobody else has actually taught this effective supervision tool. It's in the skill set and it's in the lifeguarding manual. Lifeguards are also the only skill set that is deployed to be rescue ready, and they have that advanced training in spinal management. And unless you've got that in your facility, you won't have somebody that's able to respond and recognise that vital incident in a timely manner. And finally, lifeguards are taught to have situational awareness. It's covered off in the initial skill set, and it is a piece that we need to bolster in our PD and our ongoing sessions. What is situational awareness? I think it's hard to tell that you've got situational awareness until you realise that you've lost it. So a loss of situational awareness is a gut feeling. It's nobody looking out for hazards that are occurring within the environment. It's an improper use of procedure. It's a failure to adhere to SOPs. It's failure to look outside the square of where you are. A departure from regulations. A failure to meet the planned targets that you might have in your supervision plan. It might be a feeling of ambiguity, a preoccupation or a fixation with something that's happening in your environment. This is situational awareness as it is in the 6th edition of Royal Life Savings Lifeguard Manual, and it talks a fair bit about how lifeguards run through this process. Situational awareness is to say that lifeguards are trained and practiced in the perception of the elements in their environment, the comprehension that something has happened, and the projection of the status into the near future. So that is to say that you can adequately identify that something's gone wrong in your environment or pick up on what's happening in your environment, be trained enough to make a judgment about what could happen, and then put your training into action. And I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail a bit later on, but I will come back to this slide. So, just an audience question, what's happening in this picture? Anyone want to raise their hand and tell me? Or you can shout it out. What's happening in this picture? Looks like a drowning. Yeah? Was it Trace? Thanks, Trace. Good to see you. What's wrong with the picture? Who said that? Emily. That's not how it happens, right? So drownings don't look like this. People don't put their both arms in the air and say, I'm drowning, come and get me. So that's the first point I want to make here. But perceptual blindness occurs when an individual fails to perceive an unexpected stimuli in plain sight, purely as a result of lack of situational awareness rather than any vision defects or deficit. It suddenly becomes impossible to attend to the stimuli in the given situation, and a temporary blindness effect can occur as individuals fail to see an unexpected but often salient issue. Right? If a drowning was to happen like this in front of us, most of us would pick up on it because it's how it's portrayed in the movies. Right? But that's what a drowning looks like in a child. That's what a drowning looks like. And if we combine it into an environment that looks like this, I don't know, any one of them could be drowning. Or an environment that looks like this. I think maybe the person on their back under the water in lane 2 there potentially could be drowning. So I'm going to come back to this point. Situational awareness isn't a new concept. It's not a concept that's alone in lifeguarding. I'm going to take you back to, does anyone know who that is? That's Jimmy Smith. In this picture, he's the president-elect in the West Wing doing his training. But the point I wanted to make here, and West Wing is my absolute favourite television series of all time, that's beside the point. I was looking for a photo of Air Force, and in particular the American Air Force, and this one came into my screen and I had to do that. The OODA loop, OODA loop, was a technique taught to fighter pilots in the 1950s in the United States. And OODA, OODA, sorry, I'm just getting up to my slides here, is the idea of observe, orient, decide and act, which is a 4-step approach to decision making, which is the same model as situational awareness for lifeguards. It's about being able to filter information in plain sight, putting it into context, and quickly making the most appropriate decision while also understanding that changes may be made as more data becomes available. The strategy is applicable at an individual level, and it is also applicable at an organisational level. We do this every day in business management. We have a look at data that's coming into our way of thinking. We process the data and we make decisions based on what we think the best way is to move forward. But in the 1950s, in the American Air Force, this was an advantage that they could have over their competitors. And it is about reacting to changing circumstances faster than an opponent. And in leading that advantage, they were able to actually win more battles. So, our pool decks are in a way a bit of a battlefield. It's about being able to recognise the right stimuli and make sure that the OODA loop is in play. I'm actually going to talk to it as the OODA loop rather than the situational awareness as it's put in the lifeguard situation. The first step is observe, right? Identify a problem or threat and gain an overall understanding of the internal and external environment. So what that means is that we need to be able to identify the issue that's happening in our space, right? So in a lifeguarding sense, this is actually about identifying in our scan that something's gone wrong or that there is somebody under the water, that in our scan there is a stimuli that's going to set me off and set my gut feeling wrenching that something's happening here. Because I was talking about it earlier, situational blindness occurs because we're not used to seeing people drown. There is lots of research on this. I've seen it in my own experience as a manager of a facility previously. Person drowning in front of lifeguard, me on the other end of of the other end of the pool hall, just a gut feeling going off. Just, there's something wrong in the picture of what I saw when I scanned that for 2 seconds. There is a drowning person in front of that lifeguard, and being able to radio that across. So that observe step is vitally important. The second is we need to orientate. So, and this is the second step in the OODA loop, OODA. Orientation phase involves reflecting on what has been found during the observation and considering what should be done next. It requires a significant level of situational awareness and understanding in order to make a conscious decision. Since some decisions are unconscious or instinctual, this step involves considering what and why decisions are made prior to choosing a course of action. Right? So what that actually means is that we need to start to think about training our lifeguards to inherently respond to stimuli that are in front of them. Right? They need to be able to recognise what a drowning person looks like, not from the movies, but from a real or lived experience or examples in the experience. Right? The next step is decide. The decision phase makes suggestions towards an action or response or plan, taking into consideration all the potential outcomes. So we're already covering this off. We're covering that step off in our ongoing training. We're training our team members to respond to emergencies and do rescues. But what we're potentially failing to do is actually training them to recognise the emergencies occurring in the first place. And the final step in the OODA loop is act. Action pertains to carrying out the decision and the related changes that need to be made in response to the decision. This step may also include testing what is required before officially carrying out an action. So it's also before I jump in the water, do I need to signal to somebody else, major, get in the water? So it's that step in the process. And this is a looped process. So what we should be able to do is identify a stimuli subconsciously or consciously, decide whether an action actually needs to be taken and act based upon that. And that's what situational awareness really comes down to. There's a number of factors here that can preclude this process or hamper the process. And the first of this is actually denial that the specific event has occurred. So it was a recognised factor in fighter jets that they'd be hit with the stimuli and the brain would subconsciously go, this isn't happening, and so you'd miss it. And that's that situational blindness that I'm talking about earlier. So what it is actually inherently training the team to recognise an incident is occurring. And the more that the stimuli is actually given to the individual, the greater that person has the propensity to actually pick up on the fact that it's happening. For some of us, and I remember I started lifeguarding in about 2003, 2004. That took me 3 or 4 years to actually get used to the idea of something's happening in front of me and I can go in and do that and not freeze when that occurred, because the rest of that action loop wasn't playing out for me. And sometimes it's just plainly the complexity of the stimuli that you're looking at. If you're looking at a pool full of children that are playing and you're scanning through your pool environment in your 10-second scan and every single child in your head looks like they're playing, your brain says they're playing, they're playing, they're playing. It won't necessarily pick out the drowning child, and that was the case in this particular incident for me a couple of years ago now at a particular facility. But can't blame the lifeguard. I could not blame the lifeguard for that, because once identified, the response was perfect. Defib, resuscitation, ambulance call, all that stuff came. But we missed the initial stimuli. Right. I'm going to digress a little bit into the way we're currently thinking. Right. So we're currently in sort of a media war, right? The rise of TikTok, Reels, media machines are teaching us to have a shorter and shorter attention span. And our lifeguards have a much shorter attention span than when I started in the industry. When I started in the industry, I could stand at the bottom of a 50-metre pool at Oak Park, which was my first facility. The old Oak Park had a toddler's pool a learner's pool and a 50, and you could stand on the far side of the learner's pool, and you could pick up the kid that flipped at the deep end of the 50, which was 150 metres away, and you could signal the lifeguard and go, oh, that kid flipped. And they were aware enough that they could see you 150 metres away and acknowledge and go, yeah, I've got that kid, get out, right? That used to happen, it doesn't happen anymore. We are training ourselves to bite-sized pieces of information that last 8 seconds, right? And we're training ourselves to be bored after those 8 seconds. So the challenge for us now is how do we get our lifeguards to concentrate for this long period of time? And how do we get them to overcome the monotony, the perceptual blindness, and the inherent boredom of the role? And that's a question I'm putting to the audience. What can we do? And if you've got some ideas, you can write these down in your book, and I'll happily talk to you about them afterwards. The emotional stress of the team or environment at the onset of the stimuli is a factor. So, if we've got a really busy day and you've got other lifeguards in the area, and I am a particular lifeguard on pool deck, but I don't trust the lifeguard over there to do their job properly, they're not watching their area, that can be burdensome to me watching the area that I'm looking at, right? I also need to probably be aware as a lifeguard of how well am I attuned to that person over there? Are they attuned to what I'm doing? If I jump in the water here, are they going to notice? Right? So the level of trust that exists within the team and the ability to rely on others' decisions is important as well. The amount of intuitive skill that is possessed relating to the particular stimuli is a factor here. We need to start to work out how to get our lifeguards to react to what's happening in front of them. And we need to consider the distractions that we're putting on them as management as well. Because if we say to a lifeguard, you have to stand here and look in that direction and follow this path, we're potentially putting stress on them to miss a particular drowning. So what we actually need them to do is to start to think differently and be aware of the reasons that those things are in place, but be able to adapt to the stimuli that is happening in front of them. The stimuli might be, yes, the supervision plan says I stand on this side, but today the glare from this direction is terrible. I'll go stand on that side. I'll go stand where the highest risk is. So how do we teach situational awareness to overcome the situational blindness? I think we need to have a greater look at exposure to the stimuli. So reviewing incidents, and this might be up to you, it might be controversial, it might not happen in your organisation, but reviewing incidents with a no-blame view to what went wrong, where did the child or the person come from, and exposing our team to those incidents and looking to improve. There's work being done over the last number of years around red ball drops. Yes, okay, it works, but the science behind some of this would say that you're actually exposing people to react to a red ball drop instead of the actual stimuli, but could be a thing. How do we build this into our supervision plans? And I'm going to talk about supervision plans a bit later in a little bit more detail. What other harmful stimuli can we remove from their job? If we say, and I was out at one of the Burundara facilities not too long ago, and I was talking with the manager out there around, they had a particular issue with a lifeguard that was distracted doing a head count check. There's no issue with doing head count checks as such. That is a natural distraction that's going to come into the job. But if we say that you need to do this on the hour, every hour, that's the stimuli that the team are reacting to. And I'm not saying we go and do away with head count checks and all that type of stuff. But what's important is when that task is done, that the lifeguard comes back to their area of responsibility and does a full scan of their zone. We have to get lifeguards used to doing a scan before they do something, a scan after they do something, a scan before we rotate from the area that I'm leaving, and the incoming lifeguard doing a scan of the area that they're coming into, because this stuff gets missed. And I'm also throwing a question out there. Wellness, relaxation, meditation, encouraging our lifeguards to swim might help us overcome this. Getting our staff used to not working in bite-sized 8-second TikTok length frames and actually concentrate for a period of time, or building into our systems adequate breaks, adequate rotations is really important. And the final point I wanted to make here is potentially we need to start looking at what the backup systems are. What technology, what supervisors, what teamwork, what trust exercises we need to do to help our lifeguards in this circumstance. I'll finish on this last slide. And I'll just note that I don't have my note for this slide here. But what I wanted to say here is it's really important that we support our team members, that the procedures reflect the inherent sort of built-in failure that comes from inattentive blindness, and we need to start to expose our team members to greater levels of understanding of their role, which maybe can only be built with experience. All right. Lots of thought-provoking stuff there from me. Thank you very much. I've been Alec Olszewski.
Thank you, Alex. So that kind of, ties back to back with that distraction piece and situational awareness. But the way that we come into that is, again, integrated teamwork and having literally our teams communicate with one another. So as mentioned, when I actually built in a lot of teamwork understanding when I was out overseas, within those places, we had 4 people look after this massive lagoon where we could literally have 2,500 people in that space. Ratios were none. Was nothing out there. There was no management into that. It was just like free for all. We had all 4,000 people in the lagoon. We'd have all 4,000 people in the lagoon. But the way that would happen, as Alec mentioned, is I wasn't only focused on the people in the water, I also knew where all my team was, and they knew where I was. If I needed to go in for a rescue, bam, I was able to signal, whistle, they were straight in, they were already up straight away knowing that I was in the water, and they'd be covering everyone else. So I already knew that the rest of the swimmers were safe when I was concentrated on my rescue, and vice versa. But again, it's about seeing that incident potentially occurring and making sure that others are aware, all right, exactly your team on pool deck, all right, and making sure that's educated quite well. We're going to go through and finish with a kind of a highlighting presentation before we head into our morning tea break. This is some really great initiative stuff that's happening with Aquapulse, and hopefully give a little bit of an idea of what we can do with our teams. I know going around to a few centres, there's some great team orientated initiatives. This is just something that was a little bit different, and I actually was mind blown to the fact of why didn't I think of that. It's literally one of those cases. It's again a really positive outlook. So we're going to have Hayley and Shannon from Aquapulse come up and present on what they have going on within their centre and their teams.
Thank you for having us. Today we're just going to talk about quickly about our company-wide approach to the Watch Around Water policy and the supervision of children while in our centre, and also, like Chris mentioned, just a team engagement initiative that Hayley and a couple of the predecessors at the centre we're rolling out now as part of the team since returning from our COVID closures.
Just to start us off, talking about the Watch Around Water as a whole centre approach, I'm going to get everyone in the room just to close their eyes and just going to take you through a bit of a story. So if you could all close your eyes, please. So once upon a time, there was a leisure centre whose operations team believed in the policy of Watch Around Water. Every day, the lifeguard team at that leisure centre would have difficult conversations with parents about the importance of supervision. One day, a mother came in with her son. He had just turned 4 and wanted to visit the pool for his birthday. His favourite was the splash park. On this particular day, Mum didn't bring her bathers, and so she paid a spectator fee at the front desk. Because of that, an opportunity to have a watch around water conversation was missed. On her way on the pool deck, she passed a group fit instructor who usually runs her weekly aqua aerobics class. The instructor stopped her to have a chat about the last class while her son started to play in the splash park. Because of that, another opportunity was missed to have a watch around water conversation, and the mother could no longer see where her son had gone in the pool. Until finally, the boy was found by a lifeguard out of his depth and unconscious in the nearby learn to swim pool. Everyone can open their eyes. And I just want you to have a little bit of a think about how that story makes you feel and how it resonates with you guys and what might happen in your facility. I'm going to pass to Shannon to explain.
So that was an exercise that Hayley did with our leading lifeguard and CCM, or duty manager team at the centre, and we're also now going to roll that out in one of our monthly KPI meetings with all of our leadership team from all areas of our business. So we will expand a little bit out on that, but it just really highlights that the watch around water policy isn't for the lifeguards solely. So the lifeguards are our last line of defence. So if we're leaving it just to the lifeguards, we're going to be in some trouble. So the watch around water policy or the supervision of children while in your centre, it needs to be centre-wide. So from the gym instructors having a conversation with their clients about, I might bring my kids down for a swim later today, or the kids who are sitting out at the front of the fitness, the group fitness room with their iPads in the school holidays, and I know that all of our centres have those, but how quickly a kid, those splash parks, water slides are, they're fun, so what's to stop the kids from running back downstairs and getting out of their depth there? So at Win Active, we have the watch around water a part of our corporate induction, and it's not just one slide in our corporate induction, and as you can see there, the corporate induction part B, so it is a part of the induction solely around watch around water, and it's got all the information about the why and I suppose all the roles and responsibilities for all the different roles in our centre. We do regular updates with all of our staff, so online training every 6 months. Our team, from the finance manager, from the person who's managing our websites, to our frontline team in services and our lifeguards, every 6 months the online training is done, or when there's significant updates to the watch around water policy. We also, our frontline team with conflict management training, which is, I was just speaking to Marty earlier and a couple of weeks ago in regards to how important that is, not only for our frontline lifeguards, but again for our services team with the people that are coming in. And that's just our minor, I suppose, conflicts on having those conversations. No parent wants to be told how to parent their child in our centre, but sometimes it has to happen for their safety. And also face-to-face training. So the operations team are going to take a leading role in this over the next 12 months and going into all areas of our business and running the face-to-face watch around water training. And also our values champions. So one of our key values at Western Leisure is safety. Obviously this fits under that. So a lot of our values champions every quarter are getting those awards based on a really great conversation that they've had with a parent or recognising that risk. Now we're going to go on to a bit of a fun idea. Where you go?
If we could get a raise of hands just for anyone who, when they were at school, were in a house group, a coloured house group for like athletic carnivals, team points initiative. Yep, a couple of people, team red, team blue. I was in team yellow. So essentially this idea came about. We're in a leadership team meeting, full-time DMs, myself and Lexi, who's actually in the room. It was thrown around, how can we get the team to show more reward and recognition on a day-to-day basis? And it was thrown out by Lexi that why don't we do lifeguard house groups? Why don't we get the team earning points for the great things they're doing on a daily basis? So we actually implemented 4 lifeguard house groups. So we have the lane rope tighteners, who are team purple, the slide sorcerers are team blue, the orange is the belly flops, and green is wristband renegades. So these houses are actually championed by permanent DMs within our team. So they're in charge of hyping the team up on their Slack channels and announcing point initiatives and things that we're doing. So recently we had an in-service training and the teams were asked to design logos. So these are the rough copies that they actually drew in the in-service, and we're going to get them designed and digitalised so that they look a little bit cooler. But yeah, these were made by the teams in our in-service training. So the teams out on pool deck are recognised by the coloured whistles that they wear. So a couple of our team members there the other day showing off their team whistles. So it's really recognisable on pool deck. You walk on, you know what team you belong to, and when you're inducted, you get your coloured whistle. So straight away, you're part of a team environment. So some of the things that we do with the lifeguard teams to get it going and get points earned, it's not just watch around water conversations, great supervision, you know, covering a shift last minute, all those little things. There's also some challenges and things that we do. So it was recognised that we were having trouble with continual movement, so lifeguards being stagnant on pool deck and not walking around. So we introduced something called the step challenge. So lifeguards either wearing their Apple Watch, or we had pedometers that they could take out on pool deck, just counting the steps they did in that shift, and there was house points available for the winners and things like that. Push-up challenge, which is a company-wide initiative that we do. It focuses on mental health. It's an opportunity to raise money for a great cause, but it also gets the team talking to each other, motivating each other on their Slack team channels. The team logo design that I talked about before, we actually did an amazing race as like a Christmas end of year breakup where the teams could earn points doing that as well. And a few things that we're looking to implement. The pool lifeguard challenge, it kind of came about that, you know, how do we select our lifeguards that go off to this pool lifeguard challenge for LSV? Is it just we, you know, point out a few team members? But going forward, we want to actually host an in-house pool lifeguard challenge, so the teams will nominate people from their house to compete in that, and then from there the winners will go on to the pool lifeguard challenge. A mentor program, so we're currently doing our summer recruitment nice and early, so when the lifeguards come on board, they'll meet their mentors who are within their house teams and have someone that's not their coordinator that they can go to ask questions if they're unsure or struggling with their shadow shifts or anything like that. Yeah, there's a quarterly winner, so it stays relevant in their minds. So every in-service, it's announced which team has earned the most points for that quarter, and it's ongoing. So every quarter, yeah, there's a new winner. And a little fun initiative that we actually just came up with the other day is that in our January in-service training, we think we're going to run it as a lifeguard swimming carnival. So again, the teams will dress up in their house colours, and it'll occur right before carnival season. So it's a great opportunity for them to see what the carnivals are like for the kids coming in that they're lifeguarding. But it's a great opportunity to do things like their rescues, the 200-metre swim, all those kinds of things in a fun, competitive environment, because we are in the sport and rec industry and we're all a little bit competitive sometimes. So the outcomes, it's improved performance through reward and recognition. It's competition. It's encouraging those positive conversations. So the way that points are allocated are through our leading lifeguards' end of shift reports and our duty managers' end of shift reports. So them letting them know team members are doing a great job and then sharing it with the management team. So yeah, it's a real strong emphasis on positive reinforcement to drive that performance and that supervision. And it creates a sense of belonging and team connection for a large lifeguard team that over summer we probably have 120 to 130 lifeguards. So it's a great way for them to feel a little bit more connected. So yeah, and it's a little bit of fun. But yeah, thanks guys.
Thank you, ladies. That was, like I said, a bit of a highlight positive into that. Again, it is a serious nature of the role as a lifeguard, and it was kind of funny. People have different personalities. They have that fun sense of, hey, we can actually do this. I didn't have it, so I couldn't think of anything like that. But it's funny how much just something so simple to recognise the good job that they do on pool deck. I know for some people, if you've ever gone into the notions of emotional intelligence, or for anyone in the room who have read the 5 love languages, everyone has their own different connection. Even for those people that if you go out on pool deck and say, hey, look, I saw you out on pool deck today, you did fantastic. Their day will just change just in those words. Some of the notes, leaving a note coming in, hey, we noticed, you did this fantastic idea. Their elevation will just increase, all right? Those sort of bits, we need that to uplift the performance and basically not being in that sense of being told what to do. All right, educate them, reward them, get them recognised, and that also helps in initiating a conversation. As we said, distraction and mental well-being. If you know someone who's, we're happy-go-lucky, they performed really well, and all of a sudden it's come down a bit, you can be like, hey, is everything okay? Is anything I can do to help you in order to go for pool deck? That's what we'd want. All right, again, we're people, we're not robots. All right. If we could, we'd probably end up, revolving everything around underwater cameras and having them respond. But robots won't be able to initiate a spinal or create, effective CPR in those parts, and that's why we're around. And the big notion of everything is risk management based and making sure everyone is safe in the water. Again, we've gone through distraction, situational awareness. The big initiative there is a company-wide understanding of supervision and watch around water and how we can assist the lifeguards out on pool deck. Now, I know that in a coordinator role, when I had the gym coordinator one time, and Mickey will have a bit of a laugh here that he'll come along and give us reviews on the lifeguards and how they're performing right the thing on pool deck. And you're kind of like, mate, can you just concentrate on your gym floor and we'll concentrate on mine. However, it should be a team bit. That outside vision in actually provides opportunity for training and growth. And as well as I hope they'll be receptive on the other side when we give feedback to the guys on the gym floor and being like, hey, they could have helped me with my program a little bit more, and so forth. So again, it's a team integrated bit. Whatever we can do to help equip our centre, their understanding in the lifeguards and pool deck will make us better off. All right, we're going to go through and head off into our first morning tea break. I believe there's scones, cakes, teas, coffee. We'll go out there for about 20 minutes. Please network, share ideas. This is what it's all about. Relax, enjoy, and we'll come in for the second half just before lunch. Our next team to come along from Aligned Leisure out in Eltham, we have Billy and Mackenzie from that site there, who are again doing some great initiatives there with their team regarding to performance and engagement, and I guess looking at performance management more in a positive kind of view rather than just the negative side of stuff. So Billy and Mackenzie, if you come down and just present on what you're doing out there with your teams.
Hello everyone. First I'd just like to say thanks to Chris for inviting us, giving us this opportunity to present some of this stuff that we're doing across our contract in Nillumbik for Aligned Leisure. Just to introduce ourselves, my name is Mackenzie. I'm the head of facilities across the Nillumbik contract, and this is Billy. He is our aquatic facilities coordinator. Just to give you a little bit of an insight into some of the stuff we'll be presenting as well, I'm the duty captain team leader. Billy has been in the past and will be moving back into the leadership of the lifeguard team. So it's been really cool to listen to some of the presentations on supervision, and we'll tackle a little bit of the engagement and connection. Connection's a really big part of our company values and goals. Obviously look forward to sharing some of the stuff that we've had some really good success on in the last probably 12 to 18 months in particular. So, Billy.
Thanks, Mackenzie. So pretty much as you can see today, we're just talking about a little bit about lifeguard culture. So essentially what we're trying to get involved with our lifeguard team is saying that supervision actually goes beyond just engaging with the staff and the culture and the patrons in your centre every day. We really want to make sure that we care about the wellbeing of our lifeguards as well, to ensure that they can get the best out of each other, and ourselves in the workplace. So creating small changes that part-timers, full-timers and the casuals can do to enjoy their workplace. So as part of that, what we'd like to do is really just get involved with constant daily reinforcement. So part of that includes investing time to make sure your staff are happy. You know, if you visibly see them unhappy in the workplace, approach them and say, "Hi, how are you? What's wrong? Are you okay? Can I help you? Do you need assistance? How can we support you in this time of need?" I think that's really important in raising a status about mental health post-COVID, post-lockdowns era. Well, we're still in COVID, but... so moving on, we just want to reinforce that this isn't solved by, you know, passerby comments. You know, you really have to engage and explain what every comment means. So go up to a lifeguard and say, "Thank you for educating that parent around watch around water. You've made a change in preventing drowning statistics in public leisure facilities. Thank you for cleaning that wristband out of the grates. It actually got acknowledged by one of our patrons, and that's going to go a long way in acknowledging. We appreciate your work and keep that up continuously." Next, can I get everyone to raise their hands just in regards to, sorry, I'm just scrolling down my notes. So, hands up if you've lifeguarded in the last 3 months, if you've done a 3+ hour shift in the last 3 months. And keep your hand up if you found it tough. Yeah, pretty fair, I agree. So just keep that in mind when we're going through the rest of this presentation today. It is very tough to lifeguard, all right? The attention span of the average person has decreased. As Alec mentioned before, about 8 seconds is what we're going with at the moment. We really need to increase that in the supervisory role. So next, can I get your hand up if you can name every single lifeguard in your facility? Well done. Give yourselves a pat on the back. That's a great effort. It's really difficult for people to know that. Now, I'd like to chuck your hand up if you can name a fact or just a basic bit of information about every single one of those lifeguards as well. Yep, fantastic. That shows a real sense of connection amongst the teams. And finally, keep your hands up if you can go into detail and tell them, anyone at this table, anyone at your individual tables, a little bit about their life story. It's a difficult challenge, and I challenge you to connect with your teams. Give 5 minutes a day to learn and understand their well-beings to get the best out of them and you in the workplace.
Cool, so I'm just going to introduce you to a little tool that we've used across the past 18 months, and we call it a lifeguard observation record. We implemented this probably about 18 months ago when we're obviously having similar challenges to all pools with, you know, supervision, engagement with staff, behaviours that are probably looked at in a negative light, and obviously in supervisory roles we all know what those behaviours look like. We use this sheet obviously for internal record keeping. It creates connection with lifeguards and supervising staff. It's ideal for management when can't be around, obviously early mornings, late nights and weekends. And a really big part of our company is providing feedback given from a position of trust and care. Now we'll run through a couple of different situations and examples of this lifeguard observation score sheet that we use from a positive and negative feedback point of view, and how we can kind of use this as a positive thing and not a negative thing. It's our duty captain team really does have the trust from our supervisory team to give that feedback to our lifeguards, and Billy will run through a couple of examples just here.
Perfect. So as you can see on the screen behind us, this is what our lifeguard observation sheet looks like. So they get scored on a whole bunch of criteria. And again, the point isn't to grill them and say, "Oh, you got a 2 in cleaning because you missed a wristband." It's to improve and say, "Oh, look, you got a 2 in cleaning because we noticed you walked by this wristband. Can you please pick it up? Can you please engage and provide the best service for our facilities?" So as you can see, scored on 1 to 3, and pretty much what happens is we felt that some of these areas do cross over. However, they also stand very alone sometimes as well, and really can be overviewed as different areas. So, just letting you know as well that any score that gets under 37 in the red, so gets immediately passed on to our lifeguard captain, who's responsible for the role and caretaking of the lifeguards, and they can implement strategies and support to help them benefit. Of course, everyone has a bad day, that's fine. But if we can see consistent trends, this is when our lifeguard captain can step in to get the best out of our team. So next we have an example of a lifeguard that unfortunately did receive a red, and this was quite a negative trend. So I hope you can all read the feedback there. Sorry, it might be a little bit small. But pretty much this essentially says that our lifeguard at the time had a shadow lifeguard, so a brand new lifeguard with them at the Health and Leisure Centre, and was not performing to our expected standards. So as such, this got reviewed, and we actually reported this to our lifeguard captain, who worked with this particular lifeguard in trying to improve and support their on the grounds techniques. And unfortunately, after a few more of these trending negative lifeguard observation records, it was deemed that this lifeguard did not show improvement and was eventually terminated, unfortunately. The termination process was actually quite smooth, considering we had all of this evidence and reflection points, and we showed that our support and care was there, but the improvement was not, unfortunately.
Looking at it from the other end of the scale, our duty captains, I think we have approximately 14 or 15 just at the moment, just at the Health and Leisure Centre. Off the top of my head, I think one of those team members don't come from a casual lifeguarding background, but is still a senior leader in our facility. The best thing that shows to me is that they understand what the lifeguards are doing while they're duty captaining. They might have so many different tasks to do while they're not lifeguarding as a duty captain, but they've been through it. They know how hard it is. It's not an easy job. So they're really empathetic of the guys out there, which basically gives them the opportunity to provide some really awesome feedback on really positive behaviours. As you can see, this is an example of an ideal lifeguard giving really good feedback. For example, this duty captain observed this from pool deck or doing a walk around or something like that. Then can go back to their computer, write this feedback, give them a perfect 45 score, and then head out onto pool deck and say, mate, you've done an awesome job. I really love what you're doing over the last couple of weeks. You've progressed so well over the last 6 months. Keep trending upward. We love what you're doing. Big things ahead for you. So as you can see, or we'll see in the next slide actually, that it is a really, really positive thing. And I love that the duty captains take it on themselves to provide that positive feedback. That's what kind of creates that awesome culture amongst our team, I believe. So
this is our monthly score log. Essentially, it gets reviewed and taken to our lifeguard captain, our aquatic facility coordinator, our head of facilities each month, and we look at trends and we look at where we need to apply additional support for these guards. So you can see a couple of trends there. In particular, Grayson, for example, one of our lifeguards with 2 reds. We did a lot of extra work activities with her to make sure that her supervision techniques and standards were up to our standards. As you'd see in the later months, they actually did end up improving over time, which is great to see. Okay, so next, just wanted to celebrate some of our wins that we have in our teams. And I think it's really important post-COVID and post-lockdown to acknowledge the hard work of the teams on the ground every day. We're not out there standing week in, week out for 3+ hours. It does get draining and difficult. So we need to give them a reminder and a boost about how well they're doing. So just before we jump into the next slide, just a little bit quick stats. So our Facebook page of our lifeguards has 68 members, 18 of which are either full-time staff, part-time staff, or staff who don't work in the lifeguard role actively. So pretty much more or less, we have 50 active lifeguards across the page. So as you can see here, this is one of our celebratory pieces. So we got best lifeguard shirt printed up, and they get awarded to lifeguards for a bunch of various reasons. So some for picking up extra shifts when we're short, some for staying back when we've had an incident or error, some for just going above and beyond on the day-to-day grounds. And you might see a familiar face in the bottom right corner there. Thank you to Chris for presenting that one on the day, who came for our visit, and instigating this as well. So just wanted to highlight the engagement scores from the team. So 84, 86, 74 and 90% amongst the teams. It really creates engagement and a peer positive acknowledgement through the team. It strives other guards to actually be better in themselves, not to earn a shirt, but just to be a part of the team and improve with this great culture.
Yeah, just a final one to touch on. Obviously, we've touched on the giving feedback from a position of care and trust, and the main thing I think with that little point is giving your duty captain staff the trust to deliver that feedback. They're in that sort of lower managerial role for a reason. they're our young leaders. They're the ones who are pushing up to take our positions when, you know, we all grow up, move on, and get other jobs in other industries or whatever that might be. It's not a secret. Lifeguards also obviously have full access to give feedback to each other, and obviously senior lifeguards, especially to younger lifeguards moving into the role. Mentorship is a massive part of our industry, so we really like to spread that culture as well. The connection piece for the supervisors and the lifeguards is exactly the same as well. We are not going to ask our lifeguards to do anything that we wouldn't do. So it's acting obviously as they would as well. We're providing the best and safest service for our patrons, and we put ourselves in the lifeguard shoes before we give that feedback back to those team members. The connection engagement is a huge part of what we do, and working together as an industry. And I think, as I said, I just want to thank Chris for inviting us today to speak on the engagement and connection activities that we do. But I think, obviously, at the end of the day, we all have a common goal, and it's having safe pools and happy lifeguards and high-performing staff. So, obviously, sharing our ideas and connecting, networking is a really good way to do this, and I think today's a fantastic start. So yeah, if you have any questions, come and see us at lunch, and yeah, we're happy to share some ideas and yeah, work together.
Easy, thank you, gentlemen. So again, just to reinforce and bring it home, performance management can be positive. I know I tried implementing those score sheets. They've made it a habit, and they've taken it with strive, and also to have that positive reinforcement to get that optimum performance out of their lifeguards. What we're going to go through and have another familiar face coming in to speak about an effective or creating an effective supervision plan. So this is the documentation side of what reflects out onto pool deck.
Thanks, Chris. And I apologise, I'm speaking twice. I wasn't supposed to speak twice today. I was supposed to do one presentation, but in the throes of it this week, I got thrown in a second time. I'll try and make this as quick as possible. This one's a lot more practical and straightforward. I was a little bit off in the theory and psychology last time around. So I'm talking about supervision planning and what creates an effective plan. So on this level, and RJ talked about this right at the start of the day, the GSPO is where supervision is set out. The GSPO defines supervision a couple of times, but the best one of the lot is in SV2. In general, supervision is the measures and arrangements taken to prevent, prepare and respond to possible and actual impacts in and around the aquatic environment. And I'll give you the exact reference here in my next slide. If you want to look for it, it's 2.2.1. That sort of goes to the heart of the idea that lifeguards and having a lifeguards qualified person is probably the minimum standard that you need to put in your supervision plan. And I won't go into any more detail except to say that this is one of the key reasons that spinal management process, Andy talked about it earlier, but also being rescue ready and aware of specific drowning emergencies that can occur. So the role of supervision planning, where do we start? So the key requirement of preparing a supervision plan is that the plan needs to be tailored for the aquatic facility that it is for. So we can't actually produce generic ones as easily as we might hope because the process is underpinned by risk management, which means to say that you need to go and do a risk assessment of your facility, understand the risks that are inherent to the facility and apply those in your supervision plan. And so this particular pool, that's Pasco Vale Outdoor Pool, I haven't worked there for quite a number of years. It goes back about 10 or so years. However, it's a 33-metre post-Olympic swimming pool like many pools. It's got a diving pool over the back behind the fenced area. There's this, like a concrete splash pad right over the back and a hill that runs down behind that, and a learner's pool in the middle. And this is typical of most of the pools that we have, but there are some really specific risks in this particular pool. The diving pool is the most popular attraction. It's got a local group of people that break into it just about every night when I worked there, and inevitably jump off the diving board. It's got, at the end of the 33-metre pool, it drops away to 3.3 metres. So a really significant and quite deep drop-off. And it's actually the only pool that I'm aware of that's got a double drop-off. So it drops off from the edge of the pool at the deep end back into that bowl as well. And at this point where the line is put there. And I don't have a photo of it, but somebody in their wisdom, when they built this, wrote the word danger across the bottom of the pool in large letters. So if you ever see that one from above, the pool says, oh, you can just see it in the slide there, just across the middle there. So that one has some really specific and inherent risks in it. So what goes in your supervision plan? The resources and services that are available and how they can be effectively utilised. What does that mean? That's the staff and equipment that you have in place and how that can be effectively utilised. So where it's located, what it's used for, et cetera, et cetera. When you're getting into staff, the stuff that should be in your supervision plan are who is supervising, so who undertakes that, that skill of responding or being aware of who's in your facility or responding to incidents, what their roles and responsibilities are, but it goes on from there. Who's in charge of that team of lifeguards? Who's in charge of the supervisors? What are their roles and responsibilities? How do they roster their team? How do they ensure that there is enough resources available on pool deck, etc.? And then also, what goes in your supervision plan, what are the measures taken to prevent and decrease the likelihood of risks from occurring? So it's an analysis of your environment. What are the hazards that you've got? Where does the glare occur? How do you overcome the glare? How do you overcome the distractions that you're seeing? What are the measures taken to reduce the severity of the potential or actual aquatic emergencies? Where are you taking your spinal person out, and where is the spinal most likely to occur, et cetera, et cetera. Also in your supervision plan, and this comes from the fundamental list, what are the arrangements for testing, monitoring and improving supervision? What are those structures? And we heard just a minute ago from the Eltham team about how they're supervising their lifeguards. That process is a good thing to include in your supervision plan so that everybody has an understanding of how it works. The stuff that's happening at Western Leisure Services and WinActive, building the culture in and how that works at all the facility level to build in the Watch Around Water framework, that type of thing can go in your supervision plan. And then the other fundamentals are things like links to your emergency plan, so they need to coherently talk to each other, and also links to your training plan. So how do you train? And if it says you train in a certain way in your supervision plan and it says it's a different thing in your training plan, well then the goal is to try and make those align. The best supervision plans I've seen have deployment models. Here's a really simple one. There's 3 guards at that facility and 3 zones of supervision in that one. And this is the same facility with a more complex situation in place. The key is keep it simple. This is a really effective tool for lifeguards at that facility to understand what a 3 lifeguard plan looks like and what a 5 lifeguard plan looks like. And what are the other specific hazards? Well, it's actually drawn in. There is a roller door down across the facility. Simple, effective, and tells a story. What else? Things like this. So what are the physical barriers? And this is, again, a really simple way with pictures to show lifeguards that the play structure is an obstruction. You can't see behind. The area behind the play and within the structure is consistently hidden from view, right? Lifeguards must continually track and monitor people and use scanning patterns. That's a really simple message in a single paragraph. There is a process that I'm not going to show on here, but dead water mapping. And if you haven't heard of dead water mapping, it is where you map those particular hazards across your facility and highlight them to staff. But this is another way that this particular supervision plan outlines it, which is to show this particular pool has glare at different times of day. Someone's taken the time to go and stand there at different times of day and take a couple of photos and point out what the staff might be dealing with. And again, this I was talking about this before. This is about stimuli that you can help your team recognise the hazard and help them think about what they need to do to respond to that. And this supervision plan also included some incident history. So the backstory on this particular slide is that there are a lot of children that travel from the splash park on the left-hand side of the picture into the learn to swim pool in the middle, and are immediately out of their depth when they do so. So at this particular facility, based on their incident history, based on learnings that they've had from the behaviour that children do, they've included this in their supervision plan to say that there is a transition zone between these two pools that lifeguards need to monitor as well. So again, it's reinforcing the stimuli of, I saw a kid run across there, that's actually a dangerous issue that I need to go and have a look at. Equipment plans, again, this is something that you might consider. So this is a map of the same facility that shows where rescue equipment's located. Simple, it's a reasonable idea, and it's not something I've seen in another one, but I'm sure there's many supervision plans out there that show this. But very simply, where are the first aid kits located? Where's the first aid room? Where's the defibs? Where's oxygen located? Where are rescue tubes? Where's the spinal boards located? It's all located on one simple one-page map, and it could particularly be broken down into a card that team can have a look at. And then overlay that with other emergency equipment and other emergency stops. So emergency equipment plan, this one actually shows where fire hose reels are, where emergency exits are, where the emergency stops are located. I can't remember what the S is. Oh yeah, security alarm panels, like where you can actually turn off alarms and things like that, and switchboards. So this is the extent to which supervision plans could go. I think, again, keep it simple. It may be too much for some, but if you can get the message in an effective way and show your staff where things are, it all helps. Finally, I wanted to say and just talk about some of the situational awareness stuff that I was talking about before, and talk about how we can integrate that type of thinking into supervision plan. So I want to talk about rotations, roving patrols, and how they affect situational awareness. So roving patrols, and this is sort of theory that we sort of take for granted here, but roving patrols are recommended. Lifeguards should adopt roving patrols such that 4 out of every 5 minutes, and the other, such that they are moving for 4 out of every 5 minutes. And the other minute is spent in concentrated observation of the entire zone from an agreed vantage point, blending between intensive and extensive scanning. So what does that mean? That means that I've got the zone of responsibility in front of me that I'm responsible for at this point. I should rove that position to understand where it is that I can best stand to observe that area. And then I should undertake a scan. Or I should consistently undertake scans throughout that area. And what's a scan? A scan is concentrated scan of the area that I'm responsible for, but then an extensive scan as well. So not just this part of the pool, but also the extended part of the pool that may not be my responsibility, but being situationally aware, I need to understand that the person that's responsible for the other half of the pool that I'm looking at is doing a good job, that there's nothing else in the environment that's setting off my situational awareness triggers, the gut feeling that something's going wrong somewhere else. Whilst on your roving patrol, it's important that lifeguards maintain concentrated observation and keeping their eyes on on the pool, rather than on the pool deck or looking at the walls ahead. It seems kind of obvious, but putting that in your supervision plan is a really important tool to help reinforce that behaviour. Lifeguards, when walking around a pool, should back into corners. It's not a behaviour that we see very often, but it is one that once we get our lifeguards aware of why they need to do it, can actually really improve their response times in their lifeguarding. Next, I wanted to just talk about rotations. Rotations are a high-risk activity which actively cause a break in supervision. Right? There is a time period in which a pool that is being rotated to and from has the potential to be not supervised. In low lifeguard models, this is even more of a problem. Because if you're travelling from, and I was at a facility not too long ago and we were talking about the transition in rotation from an indoor pool to an outdoor space, but the indoor pool was at one end of the indoor part of the facility. There was a pool that was closed in between, and then this lifeguard had to travel to the outdoor pool, which was some 30, 40, 50 metres away. And what we were discussing in there is that there's an opportunity, there is a time period of which the pool itself may not be actively supervised, but there is an opportunity for the lifeguard to do a full scan of their zone, and the lifeguard at the other pool to do a full scan of their zone, and identify a safe time to do that. And if it wasn't safe to do so, to call the assistance of somebody else to help them supervise. Too often, we're in a situation where a rotation is called and everyone blindly looks at their feet and turns in and goes. What we actually need to build back into our supervision plans is this idea that before we make a change to our supervision model, as it is at any particular time, is that everybody in each area does a full scan and actually acknowledges that it's safe to do so. Yeah? It might take a little longer, but we've got radios these days, and it is a period where a lot of incidents are occurring. The incoming lifeguard into a new space should look at their pool or their entire zone of responsibility by way of a full scan when they arrive. Full scan of the zone, intensive and extensive. Get an understanding of what you're walking into, and then begin your roving patrol. And these are the types of things that we need to build in. The preference with rotation should be that all rotations are actually facilitated by an additional staff member. Taking opportunities to call staff members back from breaks to help facilitate a rotation is a better solution than rotating without an assistance process. It is the less risky approach. If that cannot occur, all lifeguards in that rotation should agree that it's safe to do so and pick an opportune moment, but realise there is a break in the supervision likely to occur, and to alleviate that risk, a full scan of the zone before and after is what we're recommending. Right. In summary, what goes in your supervision plans should be as simple as possible. There are some must-haves, and I'll just reiterate those. It's the resources and services that are available and how they can be effectively utilised. This includes who is supervising, including their roles, their responsibilities, and who is responsible for rostering them, and what processes you have in place for effecting that roster. What are the measures taken to prevent and decrease the likelihood of aquatic risks from occurring? So what have you got in place that is reducing the aquatic risk from occurring? So that could be things like your Watch Around Water program, your culture program, your supervision monitoring systems, and the like. The measures taken to reduce the potential or actual aquatic emergencies. So what are your emergency procedures or a link to your emergency procedures? What equipment, where it is available, and the like. And finally, the arrangements for testing and monitoring and improving supervision. Right? The best plans will inform your people of the risks, the hazards, and support their learning. It'll also support their situational awareness and give them methods to manage their environment safely. Thank you, that's me.
So strong supervision plans can reflect to more efficient performance on pool deck. Now, Alec has a definite passion for supervision planning. So if you're stuck in a rut with any of your supervision or where you want to go with that, Alec is available for consultation to help you with that. We're going to go and finish off again on a nice high note before we get into the lunch break. We have Nate and Rosie down from Melbourne Sport and Aquatic Centre to go again more highlighting into performance management in a total facility and getting that that high performance out into that. So after this presentation, we'll sum up with some events and then we'll go along and feed our stomachs along the way. So Nate and Rosie, if you want to jump up here and yeah, communicate with what you have today.
Well, thank you everyone, and sorry that we are pushing the last speech for today. We'll try and make it as fast as possible and not waffle on. So I'm Rosie, this is Nate. We look after the lifeguard team and one of the swim school teams at MSAC, along with a bunch of 6 other managers. And today we're going to talk about aquatic supervision and its relation to performance management. So really linking a lot of what everyone has talked about already today into a wider picture image of a centre. So when we look at aquatic performance and supervision, we look at our staff members as a full life cycle with us. So we believe every element within the life cycle relates to this topic, but today we're only going to be focusing on 3 of them: onboarding, development and retention. Those are probably our key areas where we really highlight what our expectations of our staff are, and then those follow-throughs with how do we manage them going on from there. So just a little bit of our ethos. So MSAC is really, and Melbourne Sports Centres as a whole, which covers 3 sites at the moment, has a really strong ethos which we push to all of our staff members and all of our positions throughout the centres, really focusing on giving our staffs the opportunity to grow and develop themselves, working as a team to be adventurous and try new things, as well as be motivated and motivate others with a positive attitude at all times.
Yeah, so a little bit about Melbourne Sports and Aquatic Centre, also known as Melbourne Sports Centres. We cover MSAC as well as Lakeside and Parkville, and we've also just obtained a basketball centre as well in Knox. In terms of Melbourne Sports and Aquatic Centre, we're the largest multi-sport facility in the Southern Hemisphere, and we also host a lot of international events as well. We're hosting the FINA World Short Course Championships later on at the end of the year, which we're really excited for. That'll be out in the outdoor pool. We've also got a lot of technology within our pools as well. We've just implemented some Hawkeye technology into the outdoor and indoor pools. We've got movable floors. We're one of the first aquatic centres to have movable floors. That's on both the indoor and outdoor pool and also the multi-purpose pool. And if you're travelling as well upstairs in our hydrotherapy pool, we also have a cold plunge pool as well, which is available not only to elite athletes, but also members and patrons that utilise our facility. In terms of the aquatic team, I'm currently the lifeguard and lifeguard supervisor team leader. I look after a team of over 70 aquatic lifeguards and also 14 aquatic lifeguard supervisors. Now, we're all about progression within our organisation. It's one of the biggest driving factors that we have. A lot of check-in and communication is great to be able to see where people are hoping to to go as they progress within the organisation. It's something we'll touch on a little bit later. We've just promoted 3 of our lifeguards into the lifeguard supervisor role, and we're also looking at bridging that gap between lifeguard and supervisor.
Yeah, and then the swim school information is up there as well. So we have 2 swim school team leaders, myself and my colleague Blair, who cover Learn to Swim as well as our schools program, and then 3 part-time / full-time at the moment deck supervisors, and a team of about 40 swim teachers with quite a few new ones coming on board. We also have 3 coaches for our professional athlete squad program as well. So there's a little bit of information up there about how many hours and how many students, but we'll keep moving. So first area we wanted to cover is our onboarding elements and what is involved in those. And for us, we have a very structured and strong onboarding process across our whole facility, but we'll focus on our departments specifically. So every new staff member, when they are onboarded, is required to go through a Get Started package through our HR digital portfolio, digital platform Dayforce. This package includes all of their paperwork and all the administrative side of things, as well as an introduction to all of our online training. So the staff members are given the opportunity to be introduced to our policies and procedures. A lot of our manual handling and work safe training is all done through this online portal. And throughout their employment, things are added back into this when they have to do annual reviews, when they have to do updates. If they advance into other positions, things can be added. And it's a really central location for their whole time within our employment. Adding on to that, all of our inductions within MSAC and our specific departments, most staff members will go through 4. Our global induction, which is the same across all of our sites, is a really basic and welcome introduction run by our HR department to get staff members on site. They get a tour, they get their uniforms, they get to meet people, meet fellow new staff before they get introduced to their specific area-specific inductions and additional training. We've got a little breakdown of the 2 departments and how we cross over in terms of our induction processes. Both start very similarly between our 2 departments with all the online training, compliances, and making sure staff have ticked off every administrative side of things before they are even welcomed onto site. Stages 1 are quite similar between the 2. The lifeguard structure is quite practical in how they deliver their inductions, whereas the swim school one is still a little bit of a more theoretical to start with, and then the practical stuff comes later with the second stage. The lifeguard process is split for their inductions across their 3 shadow shifts, so quite a lot of practical learning linking into the policies and procedures and some of the documents that have been talked about today. Whereas the swim school one starts off with an emergency and procedure-based induction, then moving into covering our curriculum and shadow shifts, obviously whether they're coming in through training hours or coming from another facility with experience behind them.
On this as well, we found with lifeguards, it can be quite overwhelming coming into such a large aquatic space. We've got currently 8 different aquatic spaces, as well as an extra swim analysis lab. And getting staff to come in, there's first day nerves, and also, you build rapport with them during the interview. You only get a small glimmer of what they have to offer during that interview. And so having that midday shift is a great way to be able to have them meet with me, and we can sit down in the cafe and we actually talk about where they plan to progress with their career within the organisation, but as well as what their fears are and what they actually feel they need support from us with. So that's what we really drive during that midday shift, and it's a really great way to ease them in, because a lot of these first days can be really overwhelming, and especially when you walk into a place where we've got multiple escalation processes as well, with lifeguard supervisors and then a senior DM on top of that covers the entire aquatic venue. We want to make sure that they're as well equipped as possible when they come in, so that by the time they hit their open and close shifts, it's not trying to learn everything all at once. Onto that, we have a incident reporting software called 24/7. We did try using iAuditor and GoCanvas and all of those other data input services. The problem we found with those was the information that we were gathering we weren't able to go back and provide further information or provide updates. It would mostly be a form that would be sent out and we'd review. Whereas the great thing about 24/7, which we've had for about 14 months now, is it gives us the ability to have not only venue response or duty manager further actions, but also executive team further actions as well. So we can make sure that the follow-ups are definitely happening, and if we pull up an incident report, we know when it's happened and who's responded to it as well. It gives us the ability to link reports together too, and also in terms of expanding with our current base, it did initially start as shift reporting with a dispatch queue that would sit in a control room. We've now moved it across to each department where they're able to do their own daily checklists and everything else like that. So it really is something that encapsulates the whole venue into one system. In terms of our personal communications, this is a snippet of our Slack page. We utilise Slack. It's a great way to promote work-life balance and also have staff feel as though they don't need to give up their own private phone numbers or their Facebook account or Instagram or things like that just to be in touch with people from work. It's also great at being able to set notifications for specific times, as well as set different statuses based on, you know, if they were on holidays or if they were taking time away and things like that. And we found it's really been helpful, especially when we've got such a dynamic team where multiple people are working different days and different shifts, where we're able to quickly work out whether someone's able to fulfill a shift or whether you know, they're away or they're on holidays and things like that. We use it hand in hand with our Dayforce system.
We will keep moving.
Acknowledgement and rewards. We have a team member of the month, and we're lucky enough to be in the presence of one team member of the month, the safety hero for April. It's Neil down the end. So for all things safety, check in with Neil. But yeah, this is a great driver. What we were finding was in a lot of our shift reports, staff were, especially lifeguard supervisors, were promoting lifeguards and going, oh, really great team. Everyone's come together, or in particular, Harry's done a really great job lifeguarding today. We want to recognise his great achievement. And so what we've done is we've created a team member of the month where we can funnel all of that positivity that we're getting through shift reports into this award, and it's something that they can pass on to further employers and other people as well, which recognises all of their amazing efforts and talents as they work with us.
So looking at development now and development opportunities, obviously we're at one right now and quite a few of our staff are here as well, which is great to see. This sort of event, as well as leadership workshops and things like that, are a really good way to promote development within your departments. Melbourne Sports Centres themselves run leadership workshops and additional training for our staff, which are encouraged by managers and team leaders to promote to the wider teams where they deem appropriate, whether it meets with someone's specific goals or whether it's just a wider knowledge base for them to go from. We obviously also have our team meetings and trainings, so in-service trainings quarterly. The Lifeguard Supervisor team also have a once-a-month meeting, which is a really great opportunity for them to continue to develop skills, but also have that communication back to Nate and the further management team from there, to update policies, to look at new initiatives, to think about things that they've seen on deck that we may not have noticed because we're not always around. And then following on from that, there's also obviously conferences. A lot of us would have been at the ARV conference a couple of weeks ago, things like that, and those external opportunities for our staff to be able to encourage them to grow themselves and see what the wider industry looks like, as well as just other than just the centre that they work in, and see some of these programs that are going on across the industry. We do have a formal performance management process, and this is the last thing, I promise. For all of our staff, when they are employed, they're obviously on a probationary period for the initial employment, whether that be 3 or 6 months, depends on their position or their role within the centre. During this probationary period, they get a midway check-in as well as an end-of-period review. So during that time of initial employment, we do regular conversations with these staffs, whether they be informal or formal discussions, where they are able to provide us feedback on what they're learning, what they have enjoyed, what they're struggling with, whether there's additional training we need to provide them. and where they want to go, whether they've noticed something that they hadn't thought about before and now they want to try that out. All of that, as well as our performance reviews, are digitalised through our Dayforce program. They're discussions between management and the staff member themselves, as well as the wider team. So this is an example, not a person from our team, of how our Dayforce looks and the performance management process. Our formal performance management for our part-time and full-time staff is mandatory. For casuals, it is encouraged. They can nominate to go through this process, and we really do encourage them to. Our lifeguard team is nearly fully part-time, so they all participate in that. Our swim team is sort of in that crossover stage between casual and part-timers, just because of the nature of the work. So this really gives our staff an opportunity to express themselves and tell us what they're thinking and what they enjoy about our workplace, and for us to work with them to continue to better their employment as well as them as individuals, whether they go on to other things post working with us. So Nate, did you
We have future progression pathways as well. We're looking at bridging the gap. We recently promoted a few of our lifeguards into lifeguard supervisors, and we've found that that the jump is quite a big jump. It's going to a really large-scale facility, and they're currently training, but I think we can do a better job at making the transition from lifeguard to supervisor a lot smoother. Just the plant room alone, goes over multiple levels as well. And so what we're looking at implementing into the future is a leading lifeguard role, where we can use that to promote the progression within the organisation, because really that's what we're built upon. We really enjoy having lots of different avenues, and we understand as well that not all lifeguards want to progress up into leading lifeguard or into lifeguard supervisor. We also have venue operations who are pretty much roadies who set up and pack down for different events, as well as customer experience and food and beverage. So we really want to try and create the best possible pathways for them, and this is just another feather in our bow for what we can provide to them in the future.
So that's all from us, and lunch smells amazing. So we'll finish up there and hand over back to Chris. Thanks, guys.
No, thank you. Easy. Thank you for your time and being open to present the topics there. As I'm sure we've got plenty of hungry tummies on the way, so we'll sum up rather quickly. But please, during the lunchtime opportunity, please feel free to ask questions among you. Please feel free to approach the presenters for questions, and us as Lifesaving Victoria representative questions as well. So there are a couple of events on the cards. Pool Lifeguard Challenge. We're opened up to 24 teams. If anyone is interested, we're after 6 more to fill in those gaps. Really big thing, it's more than just a competition, it's a development opportunity for your lifeguards. And also a great teamwork opportunity as well. And for those leaders, is a fun day out of the office. Some great giveaways from our sponsors as well, if that entices you to go along and bring a team along. We have our industry summit coming up at the end of the month, and for this weekend only, we have tickets coming on at $99 a head. That will increase past Monday. So for the early parts of the event, we do have our early bird pricing there. So please jump on board for that one. Really great venue we're getting to is go over to Marvel Stadium, if that doesn't sell it enough. It's quite a new venture out that way. Just for some last parts here, we're setting up for our afternoon event. So I'm going to graciously ask this end of the room, when we do head out for lunch, if you could please clear as much as you can from the tables there to help our side, just to prepare for our afternoon event there. Otherwise, really grateful for all of your attendance and support here today. Moving on in the future, if anyone or you guys at your centre are doing something that's different or outstanding that you want to share amongst industry, please approach us. We're all about sharing and networking and sharing the positives amongst everyone else. So if you do have something that you feel like is worth promoting out there, please approach us, as much as, Billy, MSAC, Emily and the team have come out today. So let's go ahead. We'll go through, pack up those ones there, feed our hungry tummies, And for everyone who's presented, could you please come by and see me? We have some gift packs for you.